going round telling everybody we're on air. It's now telling me we're live. So,
okay. Oh, look.
Roll credits. Yeah, welcome to Alice in Wonderland. Your narrator for tonight's proceedings is Jade.
Thank you. And should anyone else want to read, they are welcome to. Just let me know. But I will be, over on the page where I'm reading. Oh, that's a really nice Alice there, Dee.
It's from the game.
Okay, just for the benefit of the audience, I will pop. There we go. Wow. Okay, that's a new take on the Cheshire Cat.
You mentioned reading there, Jade. I mean, that's quite a long shot for everyone on YouTube, including myself. You've not got a video form or pop-up book.
No, I'm sorry. I realize this may be, very difficult for you, but there is this thing called a book. And
does
you
it
hold
float
it
in the
your
bath?
Hand.
Well, okay.
It does not float in the bath.
If I may, before we do actually get diverted down this tangent of
down
tonight's
this rabbit
main,
hole.
Yes, down this rabbit hole tangent of tonight's main topic. I would like to let Jason get his word in edgewise, because he had a question for us at the end of the last hangout.
Yes,
and there was something else. So,
however, may I make a request of everyone here, because there may be some children listening to this later. Let's watch our language and our
absolutely
references.
Absolutely. And as we are actually going to be doing a reading.
Sorry, it's real. Sorry.
We're actually going to. Jade is going to be reading from Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll.
Sorry.
And given the material is in the public domain by this stage, a public reading of it does not in any way break YouTube's terms of service, terms and conditions, or community guidelines, because this is material that is in the public domain.
You need to mute me every now and again, then, because I have a potty mouth, and I do apologise.
Well, as long as Jade doesn't mind giving way for the occasional ad-lib, then I suppose we could make it a little entertaining, as long as you do bear in mind that...
feel free to mute me. That's all
right.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, but do bear in mind that this will be a reading, so there will, as Jade points out, at some point, maybe some subscriber may think, oh yes, Alice in Wonderland. I'll let my kids listen to that.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'll tone it down.
I also mentioned it to Inventor Gorilla. Well, Christian, no longer Inventor Gorilla.
Yeah.
So what we can do, though, is after this is uploaded, I can do an edited version and put it on my channel. So we can leave the live one, whatever craziness happened live on Brian's channel, and then I can download it to mine, and I can edit anything out that, So for those of you who are listening and wondering, we will have the G-rated version on my channel and the PG-rated version here.
Maybe I should put a less scary picture up, actually.
No, that's okay. Given kids today, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
And I promise to be on my best behaviour, no more adult humour.
And just because I'm reading Alice in Wonderland doesn't mean, that you can't stop and ask questions and things like that.
Yeah, but
this isn't, of course, a biblical comment. It's not like we're doing a Bible study or something where we have to analyze each word. But yeah, that doesn't mean you can't stop or you can't volunteer to read if you would like to.
Well, I feel bad because I've already shamed children who weren't mine. I was asked to babysit once, and I did, these two girls, and I was lying there watching TV on this bed, and I forgot they were there playing. And I started swearing at the telly. I'm not going to say what I said. And then they started repeating and asking me what these words were. I told them never to say it again. And they said it to their mum when she came home.
Well, one of the things that I learnt from being a parent, and I suppose, maybe there may be some therapy bills that I'm responsible for. I don't know, but when it came to bedtime stories, Jasmine in particular used to absolutely love my embellishments because she knew the stories, and the little embellishments just gave it that fresh edge. So as long as Jade doesn't mind for her edited version, the G-rated version, maybe if there are some ad libs that get thrown in, um, sort of, it may be an idea to reread the bit just before.
I was going to say that if somebody interrupts something, and it was something like squirrel.
Yeah, well, I was going to say we do have the Google Effects button. So if we go over there and we decide on a sound effect, I don't know, maybe like a horn honking or something humorous, and we use that to prelude an ad lib, then that will give what's that?
Look at Jason.
No, that's too downbeat.
It's a bit much.
Just pick anything,
No. There you go. The doorbell.
Okay.
That works.
And that will also signal me that there is a ad lib.
And when you're doing your edit, it will signal to you that there is an edit point.
Exactly.
I left a little message in the side for you guys too, so take note.
Okay.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, just take note of what I said there. I won't broadcast it, just so you know.
Okay. Well, that's another possibility too. If you feel you must say something, you can always type it in the chat.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But true to the ethics of this channel, the onus is on the participants to temper themselves. It is not my responsibility as host to temper you.
Yep, it's our responsibility as alleged adults.
Exactly. Alleged is definitely
exactly. Because at the end of the day, my right to take umbrage is directly proportional to your intent to cause it.
Right. Okay, so are we ready?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Time for Alice. Okay.
Actually, no. No. Order, just as a point of order, before we get distracted, as I said, by the rabbit hole of our main topic,
which
Jason
is exactly where we're going.
have a question for us, and he's banging his head against the wall in sheer frustration
don't hurt yourself.
to get his word in edgeways. And out of sheer pity, empathy, and concern for my friend, Jason, get your question out before that throbbing vein on your forehead explodes.
My God, I've never heard somebody say so many words to say nothing in my life. Right.
Hang around.
It was a simple little point, and this is probably something everyone knows anyway. It was something that Mimica said earlier, and it was just a daft little fact. You said about blowing smoke up somebody's bottom, to put it politely. You said about Jade's age, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up your ass, you know. Do you watch much QI?
I used to watch it when I used to watch TV more about 5 years ago, but I haven't watched it for a long time now.
Do you know what blowing smoke up the ass is a cure for? Well, was considered a cure for.
We have to say bottom because it could be children, by the way. But no, I don't actually know.
Well, let's put it this way: all along the Thames, the river, there were handheld bellows along the Thames. And in case anybody fell in the river and started to drown, they got dragged out, You would breathe your cigarette smoke into the bellows and blow it up their ass to stop them drowning.
Bottom.
And
It's bottom, Jason. It's bottom. There could be children listening.
Because as every budding biologist knows, we breathe not through our nose, but through our bottoms.
Some of us talk through it.
It's one of those odd little things like blowing smoke up the bottom is a cure for drowning. Now, what I wondered when they said this on QI, I thought it was spectacular. How did they come to this decision? What random event happened? Now,
I would imagine.
Well, you can say there might have been a coincidence where somebody recovered from drowning while having smoke breathe up their bottom. But why was that happening?
It could very well be one of those things whereby some fluke of positioning actually gave somebody the sort of, recovery response, it just so happened that whatever it was coincidentally blowing smoke up their bottom.
The fundamental.
It also could have been from. They had some rather interesting theories about how the human body worked, and they could have thought that was perhaps the best way to get entrance into the stomach or something. They may have thought that's what you needed to do. You don't know. They did have some really strange theories about.
And gas is
things
emitted
like
from that area.
It is.
Oh, well, maybe that's the
thing
logic
is, we're not
someone
talking
thought.
about the Middle Ages. This is fairly recently.
Has this happened
But
to
if
you,
you're
Jason?
thinking gas was emitted from that area, they could have somehow tied that to breathing. In some weird way, I don't know.
I think a lot of people used to
It's
speak from
just
their
one of
fundament
those-
many moons
Of
ago,
all-
and
of
that's
all the
perhaps where they got this
weird
crazy
thing.
Sorry, after you, I was talking nonsense.
You know, of all the weird things mankind has believed, that ranks up there.
Yeah, it is rather strange. It does have to be said.
Sounds quite pleasurable, though.
Well, yes, I just thought that was an odd little fact people might like.
Well, yeah.
I'd give it a go.
So, Huck, welcome to Alice in Wonderland, the show in which we actually do a public domain reading of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland.
Curious.
Indeed.
Indeed.
We are open to the occasional ad lib, signified or preceded by use of the sound effect in the Google Effects sound department. This
And
is
if
to
you
help
can't
Jade.
find it, you can just say ding dong.
Yeah.
Wait, Huck Hound, are you Scottish by any chance?
Yes, sir. I am Scottish.
I thought so. Do you know how I knew?
Your accent, Ben?
No, I did know your accent. I did know you have. No disrespect at all, but I've been to Scotland many times, and there is a Scottish look, and you have that. The straight nose and the eyes and the forehead.
Cool.
Strange. It's just a weird thing I noticed. That's all right. I just assumed that you are as well. I was my hunch was right.
Just the right amount of crazy.
There you go. So on that revelation, unless there were some other words you wanted to wedge in there at the start. Jason?
Anyone else?
I'm going to mute so you can continue. I told
Or anyone else? I will take that silence for a no.
All right.
Okay, so Jade.
Here we go.
Over to you.
Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bag and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the hot day had made her feel very sleepy and stupid, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies, when suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. Now, there was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be too late." When she thought it over afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it all seemed quite natural. But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat or a watch to take out of it. And, burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the wondering how in the world she was to get out again. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, then dipped suddenly down, so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Either the well was very... Yes.
At which point, Alice realized that the infamous boob moot or something had actually meant that she missed the reason why she was falling down the rabbit hole, because it didn't get broadcast.
Ouch.
So,
okay.
Did you want to back the truck up a couple of paragraphs?
Yes.
Or a paragraph?
We'll back the trap up. I will move.
I'm thinking of your edit.
I will move the appropriate device so that it will get out of the way. There we go. It hasn't been working. Today it decides to freaking work.
Okay.
Okay. So let's go back a little bit.
I was just after the waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, I actually started a little bit before that. So there was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be too late." When she thought about it afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it all seemed quite natural. But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. And burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment, down went Alice after it, never once considering how in the world she was to get out again. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down, so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, but she had plenty of time as she went down to look about her and to wonder what was going to happen next. First she tried to look down and make out what she was coming to, but it was too dark to see anything. Sides of the well, and noticed that they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves. Here and there she saw maps and pictures hung upon pegs. She took down a jar from one of the shelves as she passed. It was labeled orange marmalade, but to her great disappointment it was empty. She did not like to drop the jar for fear of killing someone underneath, so she managed to put it onto one of the cupboards as she fell past it. Well, thought Alice to herself, after such a fall as this, I shall think nothing of tumbling downstairs. How brave they'll all think me at home. Why, I wouldn't say anything about it, even if I fell off the top of the house, which was very likely true. Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end? I wonder how many miles I've fallen by this time, she said aloud. I must be getting somewhere near the center of the earth. Let me see, that would be 4,000 miles down, I think. For you see, Alice had learned several things of this sort in her lessons in the schoolroom, and although this was not a very good opportunity for showing off her knowledge, as there was no one to listen to her, still it was good practice over her. Yes, that's about the right distance, but then I wonder what latitude or longitude I've got to. Alice had not the slightest idea what latitude was, or longitude either, but she thought they were very nice grand words to say. Presently she began again. I wonder if I shall fall right through the earth. How funny it'll seem to come out among the people who walk with their heads downwards. The antipathies, I think. She was rather glad there was no one listening this time, as it didn't sound at all the right word. But I shall have to ask them what the name of the country is, you know. Please, ma'am, is this New Zealand? Or Australia? And she tried to curtsy as she spoke. Fancy curtsying as you're falling through the air. Do you think you could manage it? And what an ignorant little girl she'll think me for asking, though it'll never do to ask. Perhaps she'll see it written up somewhere. Down, down, down. There was nothing else to do, so Alice began talking again. Dinah'll miss me very much tonight, I should think. Dinah was the cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah, my dear, I wish you were down here with me. There are no mice in the air, I'm afraid, but you might catch a bat, and that's very like a mouse. You know, but do cats eat bats, I wonder? And here Alice begins to get rather sleepy, and went on saying to herself in a dreamy sort of way, do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats? And sometimes, do bats eat cats? For you see, as she couldn't answer either question, it didn't much matter which way she put it. She felt that she was dozing off and had just begun to dream that she was walking hand in hand with Dinah and was saying to her very earnestly, now, Dinah, tell me the truth. Did you ever eat a bat? When suddenly, thump, thump, down she came upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice was not a bit hurt. She jumped up to her feet in a moment. She looked up, but it was all dark overhead. Before her was another long passage, and the white rabbit was still in sight, hurrying down it. There was not a moment to be lost. Away went Alice like the wind, and was just in time to hear it say as she turned a corner, oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting! She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all around the hall, but they were all locked. And when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, how she was ever to get out again. Suddenly she came upon a little three-legged table all made of solid glass. There was nothing on it but a tiny golden key, and Alice's first idea that it might belong to one of the doors of the hall. But alas, either the locks were too large or the key was too small. But at any rate, it wouldn't. Yes?
Can't hear you, Brian. Can't hear you, Brian.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
You're muted, Brian.
Dang it, and there we go. Yeah, because once again Alice missed a bit of the story because the sound dropped a couple of paragraphs ago, and I would have done it sooner but I was typing the reasons for the doorbell in the private chat.
Yeah.
And this has all gone messy and a lot longer than it meant to be, which was missed the beginning of a couple of paragraphs ago because of an audio drop.
Did anyone else miss it?
I never missed it. I heard
No, I didn't miss
You
it.
didn't miss it?
Well,
No.
given that.
But I'll go back.
Yeah. Given that the Hangout is coming through me, as I understand the way it's working.
Right.
What gets recorded on YouTube is my perspective. So if I get the
That's
audio
fine.
drop, then it will probably be recorded.
Okay, so where were you? Where did you miss?
It was a couple of paragraphs to go.
Had Alice landed?
Alice hadn't quite landed. It was
Had
a
bats
few.
eaten cats?
Yeah, the bats had eaten the cats, and it was a couple of sentences after that.
Okay, well, we'll start here, okay? You ready, everyone?
So, yeah, if you start again with the I wish Dinah was here, that would
Yes, okay.
that would be a good spot, yes. And I will now mute again.
Okay, I'll go. Down, down, down. There was nothing else to do, so Alice soon began talking again. Dinah will miss me very much tonight, I should think. Dinah was the cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah, my dear, I wish you were down here with me. There are no mice in the air, I'm afraid, but you might catch a bat, and that's very like a mouse, you know. But do cats eat bats, I wonder? And here Alice began to get rather sleepy, and went on saying to herself in a dreamy sort of way, do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats? And sometimes, do bats eat cats? For you see, as she couldn't answer either question, it didn't much matter which way she put it. She felt that she was dozing off, and had just begun to dream that she was walking hand in hand with Dinah, and was saying to her very earnestly, now, Dinah, tell me the truth. Did you ever eat a bat? When suddenly, thump, thump, down she came on a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice was not a bit hurt, and she jumped onto her feet in a moment. She looked up, but it was all dark overhead. Before her was another long passage, and the White Rabbit was still in sight, hurrying down it. There was not a moment to be lost. Away went Alice like the wind, and was just in time to hear it say as it turned a corner, "Oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting!" She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all round the hall, but they were all locked, and when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever going to get out again. Suddenly she came upon a little three-legged table all made of solid glass. There was nothing on it but a tiny golden key, and Alice's first idea was that this might belong to one of the doors of the hall. But alas, either the locks were too large or the key was too small, but at any rate it would not open any of them. However, on the second time round, she came upon a low curtain she had not noticed before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little golden key in the lock, and to her great delight it fitted. Alice opened the door and found that it led into a small passage not much larger than a rat-hole. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw. How she longed to get out of that dark hall and wander around those beds of bright flowers and those cool fountains, but she could not even get her head through the doorway. And even if my head would go through, thought poor Alice, it would be of little use without my shoulders. Oh, how I wish I could shut up like a telescope! I think I could if I only knew how to begin. For you see, so many out-of-the-way things had happened lately that Alice had begun to think that very few things indeed were really impossible. There seemed to be no use in waiting by the little door, so she went back to the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. This time she found a little bottle on it, which certainly was not there before, said Alice. And tied round the neck of the bottle was a paper label with the words, "Drink me," beautifully printed on it in large letters. It was all very well to say "drink me," but the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. "No, I'll look first," she said, "and see whether it's marked poison or not." For she had read several nice little stories about children who had gotten burnt and eaten up by wild beasts and all sorts of other unpleasant things, all because they would not remember the simple rules their friends had taught them, such as that a red-hot poker will burn you if you hold it too long, and that if you cut your finger very deeply with a knife, it usually bleeds. And she had never forgotten that if you drink much from a bottle marked poison, it is almost certain to disagree with you sooner or later. However, this bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it, and finding it very nice, it had in fact a sort of mixed flavor of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast. She very soon finished it off. "What a curious feeling," said Alice. "I must be shutting up like a telescope." And so it was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high, and her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through the little door to the lovely garden. First, however, she waited for a few minutes to see if she was going to shrink any further. She felt a little nervous about this. "For it might end, you know," said Alice to herself. "It might going out altogether, like a candle. I wonder what I should be like then." And she tried to fancy what the flame of a candle looks like after the candle is blown out, for she could not remember ever having seen such a thing. After a while, finding that nothing more happened, she decided on going into the garden at once. But alas for poor Alice! When she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little golden key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found she could not possibly reach it. She could see it quite plainly through the glass, and she tried her best to climb up one of the legs of the table, but it was too slippery. And when she had tired herself out with trying, the poor little thing sat down and cried. "Come there, there's no use in crying like that," said Alice to herself rather sharply. "I advise you to leave off this minute." She generally gave herself very good advice, although she very seldom followed it. And sometimes she scolded herself so severely as to bring tears into her eyes. And once she remembered trying to box her own ears for having cheated herself in a game of croquet she was playing against herself. For this curious child was very fond of pretending to be two people. "But it's no use now," thought poor Alice, "to pretend to be two people. Why, there's hardly enough of me left to make one respectable person." Soon her eye fell on a little glass box that was lying under the table. She opened it and found in a very small cake on which the words "Eat, eat me" were beautifully marked in currants. "Well, I'll eat it," said Alice, "and if it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key, and if it makes me grow smaller, I can creep under the door. So either way, I'll get in the garden, and I don't care which happens." She ate a little bit and said anxiously to herself, which way, holding her hand on the top of her head to feel which way it was growing. And she was quite surprised to find that she remained the same size. To be sure, this is what generally happens when one eats cake, but Alice had gotten so much into the way of expecting nothing but out-of-the-way things to happen that it seemed quite dull and stupid for life to go on in the common way. So she set to work and very soon finished off the cake. Chapter 2. The Pool of Tears. Curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for this moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet! For when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were getting so far off. Oh, my poor little feet! I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears. I'm sure I shan't be able to. I shall be a great deal far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage the best way you can. But I must be kind to them, thought Alice, or perhaps they won't walk the way I want to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas. And she went on planning to herself how she would manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought, and how funny it'll seem sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, Esquire, hearthrug, near the fender, with Alice's love. Oh, dear, what nonsense I'm talking. Just at this moment her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now rather more than 9 feet high, and then she at once took up the little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice! It was as much as she could do, lying down on one side, to look through the garden with one eye. But to get through was more hopeless than ever. Try again. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Alice. A great girl like you, she might well say this, to go on crying in this way. Stop this moment, I tell you. But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears, until there was a large pool all around her, about 4 inches deep and reaching half down the hall. Yes.
Strange artifact. This end it skipped half a dozen sentences back.
Don't you just love Google?
It literally just skipped about a sentence or two.
I don't doubt it. When I was on my Hangout, one of the reasons I asked you to do it is because when I tried to do my Hangout last night, it kept shutting out on me. So Google is just being totally freaking weird.
Yeah, and I've just tried to say hi to Muskie and Char and Noob Source and Sabella and Joe in the chat room, but as always, at the moment, at the moment, because my account is frailed, thank you Google plus YouTube integration, I can't post comments. And because it's not spitting them up at me, I can't post them on the thing either. So you're not being ignored, chat room. I can see you. I just can't reply to you in any way without interrupting Jade's story. So,
hi guys, sorry
my
I'm late.
For that.
That's okay.
Hi, Mandy.
Hi, Mandy. And Dee, could you mute?
I'm trying to find a story.
I am muted when I'm not talking.
Are you? Because for some reason I'm getting background noise from you.
I've been muted when Jade's been reading.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, Google is just being totally freaking weird.
Yeah, there's another artifact, Google. You're giving me background noise even though Dee's muted. So, there we go.
Not surprising.
Okay, so there we go. That happened, and now back to Alice in Wonderland. Read to you.
So where did you skip?
Jump back a paragraph or two.
How old is Alice?
Had Alice started growing?
Sorry, mate?
Yes, she just bumped her head on the ceiling.
Excellent.
How old is Alice?
Okay, let me.
Sorry, Mimica?
How old is Alice, by the way?
Too young for you.
Yeah, I saw that.
It never actually says, does
blonde,
it?
too
She's
young.
in her teens, isn't she?
Well,
But whether it's her early, mid, or late.
Yeah, she's definitely.
Hopefully.
She's definitely in puberty, I would say, given all
I'm
the
more interested
hormones
then.
that are jumping around.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on. I'm not interested in her then. She's too old.
And yeah,
Well,
it's
she will
quite
grow up, you know.
yeah, and it's quite possible that she may have picked one of the mushrooms in the grass by the picnic where she was with her aunt or somebody.
Sister, by the
Sister.
bank.
There you go. By the
Also
bank.
sister,
Yes.
Okay, we ready again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody have any other comments before we go?
Okay.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Back to... Okay. And she went on planning to herself how she would manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought, and how funny it'll seem sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, Esquire, hearthrug, near the fender, with Alice's love. Oh dear, what nonsense I'm talking. Just at this moment her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now rather more than 9 feet high, and she at once took up the little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice! It was as much as she could do lying down on one side to look through into the garden with one eye. But to get through was more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began to cry again. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Alice, a great girl like you. She might well say this. To go on crying in this way. Stop this moment, I tell you. But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears, until there was a large pool all around her, about 4 inches deep, and reaching half down the hall. After a time she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance, and she hastily dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was the White Rabbit returning, splendidly dressed, with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He came trotting along in a great hurry, muttering to himself as he came, "Oh, the Duchess, the Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I've kept her waiting?" Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone, so when the rabbit came near her she began in a low, timid voice, "If you please, sir." The rabbit started violently, dropped the white kid gloves and the fan, and scurried away into the darkness as hard as he could go. Alice took up the fan and gloves, and as the hall was very hot, she kept fanning herself all the time. She went on talking. Dear, dear, how queer everything is today. And yesterday things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've been changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? Ah, that's the great puzzle. And she began thinking over all the children she knew that were of the same age as herself, to see if she could have been changed to any of them. I'm sure I'm not Ada, she said, for her hair goes in such long ringlets, and mine doesn't go in ringlets at all. And I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows such a very little. Besides, she's she, and and oh dear, how puzzling it all is. I'll try if I know all the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is... Oh, dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate. However, the multiplication doesn't signify. Let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris is the capital of Rome, and Rome... No, that's all wrong. I'm certain. I must have been changed for Mabel. I'll try and say, how doth the little... She crossed her hands on her lap, as if she were saying lessons, and began to repeat it. But her voice sounded hoarse and strange, and the words did not come out the way they used to do. How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail, and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spreads his claws, and welcomes little fishies in with gently smiling jaws. I'm sure those are not the right words, said poor Alice, and her eyes filled with tears again as she went on. I must be Mabel after all, and I shall have to go and live in that poky little house, and have next to no toys to play with, and oh, ever so many lessons to learn. No, I've made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'll stay down here. It'll be no use their putting their heads down and saying, "Come up again, dear." I shall only look and say, "Who am I?" Tell me that first, and if I'd like being that person, I'll come up. If not, I'll stay down here until I'm somebody else. But oh dear, cried Alice with a sudden burst of tears, I do wish they would put their heads down. I'm so very tired of being all alone here. As she said this, she looked down at her hands, and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. How can I have done that, she thought. I must be growing small again. She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it, and found that, as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high, and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily just in time to save herself from shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice. a good deal frightened at the sudden change, but very glad to find herself still in existence. And now for the garden. And she ran with all speed back to the little door, but alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table as before. And things are worse than ever, thought the poor child, for I never was so small as this before, never, and I declare it's too bad that it is. As she said this, her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea. And in that case, I can go back by railway, she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life and come to the general conclusion that wherever you go on the English coast, you find a number of bathing machines in the sea, some children digging in the sand with wooden spades, and then a row of lodging houses, and behind them a railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in the pool of tears which she had wept when she was 9 feet high. I wish I hadn't cried so much, said Alice as she swam about, trying to find her way out. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears. That would be a queer thing, to be sure. However, everything is queer today. Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam nearer to make out what it was. At first she thought it might be a walrus or a hippopotamus, but then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, she thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I shouldn't think very likely it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. So she began, "Oh, Mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I am so very tired of swimming about here, oh, Mouse." Alice thought this must be the right way of her brother's
quiet
Latin
again.
grammar. A mouse.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had another audio drop.
Yeah, I
Alice
heard that
wasn't
one.
convinced that this was the right way of speaking, was the last thing I remember hearing.
Yeah, you read the mouse bit.
Okay, she was,
And
yes,
then
okay.
After that, it went a bit.
It's a good thing I'm going to
AWOL.
edit this, huh?
Well, yeah. Yeah, but I don't know.
Okay.
There may be some element of ad hoc entertainment for those listening with, I don't know.
So all these
Yeah,
words
I
come
don't
from
know.
a book, Jade.
Mm.
Yes, they come from a book,
amazing.
Mimica. It's a fascinating thing. You know what?
Mm.
There's something even more fascinating and actually quite thrilling. There's a place where they have a whole bunch of books. It's called a
Kindle.
library.
A library?
A library. And you can go to
Is that
the
some kind of
library.
berry that you eat and make jam from?
No. A library is a big building, and it's filled with books. And
Some people love those places. They're called bibliophiles.
and they will help you find the book you want to read.
How
All you
dare
have to do is go
think?
up to them
How
and
dare
say,
you?
So let me get this straight. You can't play this on the PlayStation.
no,
No.
you
You
cannot.
can actually, yeah. There is an Alice in Wonderland game.
Hey guys, how do you put
Yeah.
a picture up like that? And which version of the book are y'all reading?
Go to
I'm
Hangout Toolbox. to start
I'm
with.
reading an old version that I
And
downloaded.
the toolbox don't work for us.
I'll post the link of the.
Also, Jade, what's the
Yes.
benefit for young children listening to this, or people who aren't very adept to reading, or perhaps are put off by reading? What do you feel the benefit is of reading a book compared to, say, playing a computer game or watching TV?
Imagination.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is. I mean, ultimately, somebody could play this back, this audio reading, or rather Jade's edited version, on their PlayStation. And the joy of it is that you get to enjoy the story without having to bumble your way through all those smudges on flat bits of mushed up wood in these things we call books. But if you do listen to the story and you get just driven on this journey of imagination and weird things happening in strange and unlikely places, that it might actually, for those listening, it might actually trigger them to want to figure out what those squiggles mean.
Yeah, and I think
See
it might
what else
perhaps
is in there.
might inspire people to try and write their own stories, maybe.
Also, that
Yes,
as well.
and
Yeah.
people who write their own stories go on to write movies and video games and things like that.
Or just the pleasure of writing books or attempting to.
Yes.
And poetry.
And the other thing too is you can play this back later and close your eyes and let your mind drift off and imagine what all these creatures look like to yourself. And even more, imagine where you would take the story if you were writing it.
Yeah, because no one has actually described what Alice looks like, but I'm sure everyone listening knows in their own mind what she looks like.
Exactly, and what color little mouse was it? Well, we know it was a white rabbit. But what color little mouse was it? We don't know that. We don't know exactly
audio
what
books
the
as
mouse
well
looks like.
work for people who are perhaps interested, or children interested.
I say the mouse was blue.
You can actually buy audio books online these days.
You can indeed, for your Kindle
And
and other things.
Alice in Wonderland is one of those that is almost guaranteed to have not one but several different people reading it.
And here's an idea. Well, maybe if children listening to this later on or now, maybe they should write their own story with Alice and make their own little adventure with Alice as well. Be interesting, see what they come up with.
Yeah.
Rather than making it more
Alice.
personal.
The Extended Tales.
Alice drinks Cheapside on the corner.
Gosh.
Well, there you go. Alice and the Cider Barrel. We had Alice and the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland, Alice and the Cider Barrel.
I'm not going to say anything because I'm keeping this child friendly.
Alice and the Asbo.
I don't know. Alice and the Asbo.
Alice gets
Did you want
respect
to?
in it.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something back a ways, Mandy? I thought you.
Alice respect.
What was that? I didn't hear what you said.
Bling bling.
Did you want to say something a while back?
Oh, I was just asking what version of the book, but Dee gave me the link. And I wanted to know how to put a picture up, but I don't know if Toolbox will work.
No, I can't do it.
Can you see the Hangout toolbox on your left? See where it says chat, screen share, Hangout
It
toolbox?
never works for us anyways.
It doesn't work, so you're just
bummer.
gonna have to do it in a pretty face.
It just always, like, every time we go to use it, it just shows a blank white box on the whole right side of the screen.
Oh, I had that problem for a while, but it finally went away. But yeah, you have to have the toolbox, as far as I know. The only other possibility is if you put a picture on your screen, and then you do screen share. Have you tried screen share?
Yes,
that works, but it slows us down really bad.
You know when you've got the Hangout toolbox open, you know there's like 5 little icons just underneath. If you click on the one that says lower third, it might actually open the dialogue up for you.
Oh, I don't see that.
There's like 5 little icons. The last one's a question mark. Then there's like a sort of text bubble.
On the left-hand side, this is.
Oh, yeah, the one that says lower third.
When you click on the right, hang on, left-hand side, there's a Hangout toolbox. When it pops up on the right-hand side, there are 5 icons. There's one of like a face. It's called lower third. Then there's some arrows. Oh, volume control, that is. And then there's smiley face.
No.
I don't have that.
I don't have it at all. There's nothing there.
Do you have a
nothing there
strike
at
on
all?
your channel?
Oh, right. In that case.
I think if you've got a strike on your channel, you might
the
be limited.
toolbox. We clicked on the toolbox, and then where you're telling us that it should say like lower third and all that, it doesn't show anything.
Yeah, I've got that too.
Yeah, see.
Because I know sometimes the lower third comes up as a blank until you click on it.
Yeah.
In that case, I can't help you. Sorry.
It should be the icon on the very left at the top of the toolbox.
I think
if
it's because we have
icons,
strikes.
then they can't do anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that doesn't work.
If you've got a strike on your channel,
a blank white box.
No.
Yeah.
No, both of us have completely upstanding accounts.
Ow!
Did you just open them?
you're gonna just hate us.
Nice for you, though.
Being a bit slow there. I was like, what?
My account's 2 years old. Or 3 years old.
Alice.
There.
Yeah.
Now I'm the queen of
Well,
hearts.
Yeah.
Said Alice to the rabbit.
Okay.
Goodness.
Okay,
Where's
so
my goddamn pills? Said Alice in a drunken rage.
Okay,
It's going to
shall
be
we
quite a
go
bit of
back?
editing, isn't it, darling?
Yeah.
Okay.
Throw some arms.
The last thing I heard was something along the
Oh,
lines
mouse.
of Alice saying something that's not a proper way to talk.
You know,
Okay. Let's see.
It's the brackets bit. Parenthesis. Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. From there.
Oh,
Take it
yes,
from
yes. Okay.
she ain't talking
So
proper,
yeah,
innit?
All right, okay.
if you hop back half a paragraph or sort of
Yeah, I've got the spot. Okay,
All
you
right.
ready?
Paragraph.
Okay.
Yep.
Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think it very likely it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. So she began, "Oh, Mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I am very tired of swimming about here, oh, Mouse." Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before, but she remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar.
And you went silent after Brother's Latin grammar.
Yeah, I lost it as well. That's
Seemed
fine.
to her wink with one of. Okay, of a mouse to a mouse. Oh, come on, you guys. She remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar a mouse. Of a mouse to a mouse, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively and seemed to her to wink with one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse come over with William the Conqueror. For with all her knowledge of history, Alice had no very clear notion of how long ago anything had happened. So she began again, où est ma chatte? Which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. "Oh, I beg your pardon," cried Alice hastily, afraid she had hurt its poor animal's feelings. "I quite forgot you didn't like cat." "Not like cats!" cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. "Would you like cats if you were me?" "Well, perhaps not," said Alice with a soothing tone. "Don't be angry about it. And yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She has such a dear quiet thing," Alice went on half to herself, as she swam lazily about in the pool, "and she sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face, and she has such a nice soft thing to nurse, and she's such a capital one for catching mice. Oh, I forgot. I beg your pardon," cried Alice again, for this time the mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain it must be really offended. "We won't talk about her any more if you'd rather not." "Well, indeed," cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of its tail, "as if I would talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats. Nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear that name again." "I won't indeed," said Alice in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. Are you fond of dogs?" The mouse did not answer, so Alice went on eagerly. "There is such a nice little dog near our house. I should like to show you. A little bright-eyed terrier, you know, with oh such long curly brown hair. And it'll fetch things when you throw them. It'll sit up and beg for its dinner and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them. And it belongs to the farmer, you know, and he says it's so useful. It's worth £100. He says it kills all the rats and oh dear," cried Alice in a sorrowful tone, "I'm afraid I've done it again." For the mouse was swimming away from her as hard as it could go and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So she called softly after it, "Mouse, dear, do come back again, and we won't talk about cats or dogs either if you don't like them." When the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale with passion, Alice thought, and it said in a low, trembling voice, "Let us get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs." It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There was a duck and a dodo and a lory and an eaglet and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to the shore. Chapter 3. A Caucus Race and a Long Tail. They were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank. The birds with draggled feathers, the animals with their fur clinging close to them, and all dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. The first question, of course, was how to get dry again. They had a consultation about this, and after a few minutes it seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them all her life. Indeed, she had quite a long argument with the lory, who at last turned sulky and would only say, "I'm older than you, and you must know better." And at this Alice would not allow without knowing how old it was, and as the lorry positively refused to tell its age, there was no more to be said. At last the mouse, who seemed to be a person of some authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. I'll soon make you dry enough." They all sat down at once in a large ring, with the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt sure she would catch a bad cold if she did not get dry very soon. "Ahem!" said the mouse with an important air. "Are you all ready? This is the driest thing I know. Silence all around, if you please." William the Conqueror, whose cause was favoured by the Pope, was soon submitted by the English, who wanted leaders, and had been of late much accustomed to usurpation and conquest. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria. "Ugh!" said the lorry with a shiver. "I beg your pardon," said the mouse, frowning, but very politely. "Did you speak?" "Not I," said the lorry hastily. "I thought you did," said the mouse. "I proceed. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, decided for him, and even Stigand, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable. "Found what?" said the duck. "Found it," the mouse replied, rather crossly. "Of course you know what it means." "I know what it means well enough when I find a thing," said the duck. "It's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find?" The mouse did not notice this question, but hurriedly went on. "Found it advisable to go with Edgar Atheling to meet William and offer him the crown. William's conduct at first was moderate, but the insolence of the Normans—" "How are you getting on now, my dear?" it continued, turning to Alice as it spoke. "As wet as ever," said Alice in a melancholy tone. "It doesn't seem to dry me at all." "In that case," said the dodo solemnly, rising to its feet, "I move that the meeting adjourn for the immediate adoption of more energetic remedies." "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't know, and what's more, I don't believe you do either." And the eaglet bent down its head to hide a smile. Some of the yes.
Yeah, we had another dropout just before the eaglet swoops down.
Yeah, there's like a
okey-dokey.
few words when.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Okay.
I think what happened. It was when you raised your voice and emphasized the thing. I think it overloaded it because it sort of did a digital breakup.
Oh, how, yeah. God, don't you just
So,
love Google?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was the speak English.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
speak
after that
English
it went
and
a bit
yeah,
wobbly.
and it just sort of crackled out and.
Did you hear the speak English?
Yes, but it was just after that.
Okay.
It was, it cut
Okay.
out at that
Alright.
point, and we missed what happened afterwards. So,
Okay.
yeah, if you might
We'll
want
go
to
there.
reread that bit again.
I will.
To keep
Speak
it flow.
English, said the eaglet. Okay. "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't know the meaning of half those long words, and what's more, I don't believe you do either." And the eaglet bent down its head to hide a smile. Some of the other birds tittered audibly. "What I was going to say," said the dodo in an offended tone, "was the best thing to get us dry would be a caucus race." "What is a caucus race?" said Alice. Not that she much wanted to know, but the dodo had paused as if it thought that somebody ought to speak, and no one else seemed inclined to say anything. "And as you might like to try the thing yourself some winter day, I will tell you how the dodo managed it." "Yes."
I'm sorry, it just dropped out again completely after saying anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
I lost it as well. Yeah.
It's being weird, isn't it?
It is. It's
What?
being totally objectionable.
Why don't
I
you
know.
record it using an audio recording device rather than Google Hangout? Why is it you're recording on this?
What?
Actually, thinking about it, that's, well, yeah, other than reading it twice, I suppose. But yeah, that would make more sense to do it as
What?
to record it
Sorry.
locally. Given the way, I mean, this is awesome, and please don't stop because I'm thoroughly enjoying this. But for the actual,
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Well, do we have anybody watching?
Could you read it in a more sensual voice?
We do. we do actually have 9 viewers, and in an unprecedented event, this broadcast has actually received 2 G+ thumbs up. So
Really?
Google Plus has actually given us 2 G+ ratings. So
Right.
yeah, so people are watching and appreciating this reading, and
Well,
I'm one
I'm
of them.
glad they do. Okay. I
might
suppose
bring
we
an
should just
idea to you
soldier
when you
on.
finish reading this.
What?
I might bring up an idea when you finish doing this reading, actually.
Okay.
Can you read it more husky?
Well, I suppose we should just soldier on then, since we do have an audience.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to putting up a definitive reading on your channel, it may be better to record that offline, as Mem was pointing out.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're agreed too. We will have this version, so
yeah,
I won't bother doing a.
You won't bother doing a what? You went quiet again.
That died as well.
Yeah, you fell off again.
Whatever it is she's not bothering to do.
I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to bother at all. No, I won't bother editing this because I think you're right. If you are enjoying this, I would be more than happy to get my little oh, don't you love it when the mind goes? Mixer, and do a better recording, and then I could put that up on my channel.
Yeah, that would probably work better on your channel.
But as long as you are enjoying it, this was kind of a crazy idea I had yesterday. I figured if nobody showed up, I'd just read Alice in Wonderland. So
it's working very, very well. Like I said, I've got 2 G+ thumbs up on this broadcast, which has never happened. So
where were we? We're just soldier on, and yes.
Yeah, so we're going to soldier on, and all I can really do is apologize for the.
Okay.
Mandy, you're
breaking up there. Can you?
I was trying to unmute my mic. I wanted to know if we're still doing parts, or are we just reading?
If we're still doing what?
We were gonna do parts. Are we still doing parts?
Do you want to start? You want to read some, Mandy?
No, I wanted to be the Queen of Hearts.
Oh, you can be the Queen of Hearts. Oh yes. Yeah, we haven't got the Queen of Hearts. You could be the Queen of Hearts. I see your you've got your tiara on, your crown. Okay. All right. Okay, so where did we get cut out again?
My brain is completely froze.
Well, let's go back to speak English.
Speak English, yeah, because it wasn't long after that.
Yeah, speak English. It wasn't that far after speak English.
It wasn't that far off, yeah. And I said we'll just soldier on, and the people in the chat, I assume are probably...
I'll go back to muted so that I don't...
okay.
Yeah. So what language are we doing this in English?
Yeah, okay. And that way I also
and Dodo.
worry about... Yeah, English and Dodo. I won't worry so much about going back and worrying about making sure...
I won't say that joke. There's children listening. I'm going to mute.
Right. Okay.
You know where I went with that, don't you?
I know.
Yeah, okay. So, back to the
moving
plot,
on.
boys and girls. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Good. Then we will begin.
All right. Speak English, said the eaglet. I don't know the meaning of half those long words, and which more I don't believe you do either. And the eaglet bent down its head to hide a smile. Some of the other birds tittered audibly. What I was going to say, said the dodo in an offended tone, was that the best thing to do to get us dry would be a caucus race. What is a caucus race? Said Alice. Not that she much wanted to know, but the dodo had paused as if it thought that somebody ought to speak, and no one else seemed inclined to say anything. Why, said the dodo, the best way to explain it is to do it. And as you might like to try the thing yourself some winter day, I will tell you how the dodo managed it. First it marked out a race course in a sort of circle. The exact shape doesn't matter, it said. And then all the party were placed along the course, here and there. There was no 1, 2, 3 and away, but they began running when they liked and left off when they liked, so that it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running half an hour or so and were quite dry again, the dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over!" And they all crowded round it, panting and asking, "But who has won?" This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought, and stood for a long time with one finger posed upon its forehead, the position that you usually see Shakespeare in the pictures of him, while the rest waited in silence.
Lost you after waited in silence.
Yeah. Everybody has won and all must have prizes. But who is to give the prizes? Quite a chorus of voices acted. Why, she, of course, said the dodo, pointing to Alice with one finger. And the whole party at once crowded round her, crying around in a confused way, "Prizes! Prizes!" Alice had no idea what to do. In despair, she put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. Luckily, the salt water had not got into it, and handed them round as prizes. There was exactly one apiece all around. But she must have a prize yourself, you know, said the mouse. Of course, said the dodo, replied very gravely. What else have you got in your pocket? It went on, turning to Alice. Only a thimble, said Alice sadly. Hand it over here, said the dodo. Then they all crowded round her once more, and the dodo solemnly presented the thimble, saying, We beg your acceptance of this elegant thimble. And when it had finished this short speech, they all cheered. Alice thought the whole thing very absurd, but they all looked so grave that she did not dare to laugh, and as she could not think of anything to say, she simply bowed and took the thimble, looking as solemn as she could. The next thing was to eat the comfits. This caused some noise and confusion, as the large birds complained that they could not taste theirs, and the small ones choked and had to be patted on the back. However, it was over at last, and they sat down again in a ring and begged the mouse to tell them something more. You promised to tell me your history, you know, said Alice, and why it is you hate C and D, she added in a whisper, half afraid that it would be offended again. Mine is a long and sad tale, said the mouse, turning to Alice and sighing. It is a long tale, certainly, said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail. But why do you call it sad? And she kept on puzzling about it while the mouse was speaking, so that her idea of the tale was something like this. Furry said to a mouse that it met in the house, Let us both go to law. I will prosecute you. Come, I'll take no denial. We must have the trial, for really this morning I've nothing to do, said the mouse to the cur. Such a trial, dear, with no jury or judge would be wasting our breath. I'll be the judge, I'll be the jury, said cunning old Fury. I'll try the whole... Excuse me a minute. Apologies, folks. I had this set so I could read it, and it got so small I couldn't read it. I'll try the whole cause and... I'll try the whole cause and condemn you to death. You are not attending, said the mouse to Alice severely. What are you thinking of? I beg your pardon, said Alice very humbly. You had got to the fifth bend, I think. I had not, cried the mouse sharply and very angrily. Just an aside, here's a little note. If you are familiar with this Alice Wonderland in the poem actually looks like a mouse's tail, and the letters get smaller as you go down the mouse's tail, which is why I had to stop, because I had it too small to read. I beg your pardon, said Alice very humbly. You had got to the fifth bend, I think. I had not, cried the mouse sharply and very angrily. A knot, said Alice, ready to make herself useful, and looking anxiously about her. Oh, do let me help undo it. I shall do nothing of the sort, said the mouse, getting up and walking away. You insult me by talking such nonsense. I didn't mean to do it, pleaded poor Alice. You're so easily offended, you know. The mouse only growled in reply. Please come back after and finish your story, Alice called after it. And the others all joined in chorus. Yes, please do. The mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked away a little quicker. What a pity it wouldn't say, sighed the lory, as soon as it was quite out of sight. And an old crab took the opportunity of saying to her daughter, Ah, my dear, let this be a lesson to you, never to lose your temper. Hold your tongue, Ma, said the young crab a little snappishly. You're enough to try the patience of an oyster. I wish I had our Dinah here. I know I do, said Alice aloud, addressing nobody in particular. She'd soon fetch it back. And who is Dinah, if I might venture to ask a question, said the lory. Alice replied eagerly, for she was always ready to talk about her pet. Dinah's our cat, and she's such a capital one for catching mice you can't think. And oh, I wish you could see her after the birds. Well, she'll eat a little bird as soon as look at it. This speech caused a remarkable sensation among the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once. One old magpie began wrapping itself up very carefully, remarking, The night air doesn't suit my throat. And a canary called out in a trembling voice to his children, Come away, my dears, it's high time you were all in bed. On various pretexts they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah, she said to herself in a melancholy tone. Nobody seems to like her down here, and I'm sure she's the best cat in the world. Oh, my dear Dinah, I wonder if I shall ever see you any more. And here poor Alice began to cry again, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. In a little while, however, she heard a little pitter-patter of footsteps in the distance. She looked up eagerly, half hoping that the mouse had changed his mind and was coming back to finish his story. Chapter 4.
Can I just say, in case anyone's interested, comforts are little sweets. They're licorice-flavoured sweets with a sugar coating, and they're shaped like little capsule pills.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know what they were.
Licorice comforts.
Do they have doves on them?
No, they're usually they're different colours, but they're usually plain sugar coating.
Oh, they're like Grandfather's Werther's Originals.
No.
No, they are like, as I remember them, they're The closest would be M&M's with a licorice centre instead of a chocolate
I see.
centre.
So Eminem the rapper with Bertie Bassett.
Yeah,
That
basically.
kind of feel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
We have something called Good and Plenty, which is licorice inside with a candy shell, and it's kind of like M&M's except they're
Licorice.
cylindrically shaped.
Oh, they say these are well, not lozenge shapes, they're not that big, but yeah, they're like
Mm.
the shape of capsules.
And have you noticed how Trevor is actually the name Robert spelled backwards? Just something
I don't
talking
know.
about sweets.
So if someone's name is
Sorry if
Robert
I
Trevor,
look bored. I'm not bored. It's just that my teeth are hurting me.
okay.
You need to use Fixodent.
I don't have dentures.
Clove oil. Clove oil's good for toothache.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that? Huck?
Yeah, I was going to suggest clove oil.
Clove
I've used
oil.
that myself. It's very good.
Or failing that, if you've got some actual cloves, crush them up.
Tin foil, did you say?
Clove.
No,
C-L-O-V-E.
You would,
Dragon thing happened.
Mim, you'd probably recognise it in the shops as Olbus.
Is it the stuff that you put in rum and gin sometimes? Cloves and rum?
Cloves you'll find spiked into apples, and
Oranges.
apple pies. And
Yeah.
you'll see it on a glazed ham.
But you won't see it on a naturist. That was crap, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was crap, dude.
I stick them into oranges as well to make a sweet smell, to take away smells or something. Or to deter fleas, maybe, I don't know.
And we're back to the pong.
Yeah, back to pong.
Yes.
Anyway, that's what comforts are. They're a licorice flavoured candy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I did not know what they were. I mean, I've read Alice many, many times. I assumed they were some sort of candy. I just didn't know what kind.
At least that's what they are today. I'm assuming that's what they were back then.
That's probably what they were back then.
Mm.
All right, are we ready for Chapter 4?
Yep, sorry about that.
I'm going to mute now.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Chapter 4, The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. It was the White Rabbit trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something. And she heard it muttering to itself, "The Duchess! The Duchess! Oh, my dear paws! Oh, my fur and whiskers! She'll get me executed as soon as ferrets are ferrets! Where can I have dropped them, I wonder?" Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for the fan and the pair of white kid's gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting about for them. But they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since her swim in the pool, and the great hall with the little glass table and the door had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice as it went hunting about and called out to her in an angry tone, "Why, Mary Ann, what are you doing out here? Run home this minute and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now!" And Alice was so much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction it pointed to without trying to explain the mistake. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him this fan and..." Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah.
It did for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you go from and Alice was very much frightened.
Okay. Okay.
I apologise.
Quick now. That's okay. And Alice was so much frightened.
Sorry to interrupt you, break your flow again. We just got another thumbs up as well.
Woohoo!
Thanks, Kim.
2 more and we're on 5. Got the high five, we're there.
I know.
Jade's there.
Okay.
Be more husky and sensual. We'd get there.
This children's story.
How many thumbs can one woman take?
Oh my! Huckleberry.
Come down my rabbit hole.
I'll be a Huckleberry.
Come down my rabbit hole. I'm late. It's a very important day.
I'm not reading
Come
the
down my
X-rated
rabbit hole.
version,
Come on.
Rebecca. There
That
is
kind of
actually
thing.
one I've read once.
Take some pills. Come with me.
All right.
Eat me, drink me.
Here we go.
Sorry, carry on.
That's okay.
Eat me. Eat me.
I'm going to go back just a little bit further.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Love, it's... Okay, sorry, I'm shut up.
That's okay. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice as she went hunting about and called out to her in an angry tone, "Why, Mary Ann, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now!" And Alice was so much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction it pointed to, without trying to explain the mistake it had made. "He took me for his housemaid," she said to herself as she ran. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fan and gloves, that is, if I can find them." And as she said this, she came upon a neat little house, on the door of which was a bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking and hurried upstairs in great fear lest she should meet the real Mary Ann and be turned out of the house before she had found the fan and gloves. "How queer it seems," Alice said to herself. "But I suppose Dinah will be sending me on messages next." And she began fancying the sort of thing that would happen. "Miss Alice, come here directly and get ready for your walk." "Coming in a minute, nurse, but I've got to watch this mouse hole till Dinah comes back and see what the mouse doesn't get out. Only I don't think," Alice went on, "that they'd let Dinah stop in the house if he begins ordering people about like that." By this time she had found her way into a tidy little room with a table in the window, and on it, as she had hoped, a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and a pair of gloves, and was just going to leave the room when her eye fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label this time with the words "Drink me," but nevertheless she uncorked it and put it to her lips. "I know something interesting is sure to happen," she said to herself, "whenever I eat or drink anything, so I'll just see what this bottle does. I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing." It did so indeed, and much sooner than she had expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, saying to herself, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out the door. I do wish I hadn't drunk quite so much." Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing and growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. In another minute there was not even room for this, and she tried the effect of lying down, with one elbow against the door, the other arm curled round her head. Still she went on growing, and as a last resort she put one arm out of the window and one foot up the chimney, and said to herself, "Now I can do no more. Whatever happens, what will become of me?" Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and as there seemed to be no sort of chance of her ever getting out of the room again, no wonder she felt unhappy. It was much pleasanter at home, thought poor Alice, when one wasn't always growing larger and smaller and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole. And yet it's rather curious, this sort of life. I do wonder what one can have happened to me. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that sort of thing never happened, and now here I am in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me, there ought. And when I grow up, and I'll write one. But I'm grown up now, she said in a sorrowful tone. At least there's no room to grow up any more here. But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? That'll be a comfort one way, never to be an old woman. But then, always to have lessons to learn. Oh, I shouldn't like that. "Oh, you foolish Alice," she answered herself. "How can you learn lessons in here? Why, there's hardly room for you, much less a book. No room at all for any lesson books." And so she went on talking first one side and then the other, and making quite a conversation out of it altogether. But after a few minutes she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. "Mary Ann," said the voice, "fetch me my gloves this moment." Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it. But as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "Then I'll go round and get in at the window." "That you won't," thought Alice. And after waiting until she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made it snatch in the air. She did not get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of the sort. Next came a very angry voice, the rabbit's. "Pat, where are you?" And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure then, I'm here, digging for apples, your honor." "Digging for apples indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come and help me out of this." Sounds of more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Here at your arm, your honor." He pronounced it arm. "An arm, you goose? Whoever saw one that size? Well, it fills the whole window." "Sure it does, your honor, but it's an arm for all that." "Well, it's got no business there at any rate. Go take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it, Your Honor, at all, at all. Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were 2 little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumbling of little cartwheels and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words, "Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't bring one but one. Bill's got the other. Bill, fetch it here, lad. Here, put 'em up in this corner. No, tie 'em together first. They don't reach halfway high enough. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope. Will, the rope. There. Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Heads below." A loud crash. "Now, who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney?" "Nay, you shan't. You shall do it." "That I won't. Bill's got to go here down. Bill, the master says you've got to go down the chimney." "Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he?" said Alice to herself. "Why, they seem to be putting everything on Bill. I wouldn't be on Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little." She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could and waited till she heard a little animal, she couldn't guess of what sort, scratching and scrambling about in the chimney above her. Then saying to herself, "This is Bill," she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill!" Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you, by the hedge!" And then silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head, brandy now. Don't choke him. How was it, old fellow? What happened to you?"
We lost
Bill
you
thought
again.
Alice.
Lost you.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's not going on in the main chat, according to somebody leaving comments there. That they can hear everything. It's only us that seem to be getting a cutout. Not sure that's true though.
That's
Oh!
interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well,
I have
we'll
actually,
just-
I have actually noticed, as far as the video itself is concerned, whereas we get a lot of glitchiness that goes on with our, cameras and what have you, it's significantly smoother on the playback when you watch the Hangout back afterwards.
So maybe the big problem is here in the Hangout itself.
Yeah.
I think it's just us. I think we get everything, and I'm assuming everybody else gets. It kind of self-edits all of us making noise in the background and so on, and then he cut out. So
Yeah, so we're getting all the peer-to-peer stuff, which kind of makes it a little bit more important to mute when you don't have anything to say.
Yep.
To actually cut down on the bandwidth. Peer-to-peer. Okay, well, with that little mystery solved, on with the plot. Let's see what happened to Bill.
Yeah, poor Bill.
Yeah,
poor Bill.
I always felt sorry for Bill. I really did. Always felt sorry for Bill.
Poor Bill. Everything that needed to be done, they made Bill do it.
Yeah. Poor Bill.
I think we lost you.
All
Right.
right.
After catching by the hedge.
Poor old Willie.
Yes. Okay. So I think we were at. So the first thing she heard was a general chorus. Oh,
sorry. I was just right. Sorry.
Oh,
Carry on.
Anybody want to say? Okay. Ready? Okay. Oops. Gotta go to the right place. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill!" Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you, by the hedge!" Then silence. Then another confusion voice, "Hold up his head! Brandy now! Don't choke him! How was it, old fellow?" "What happened to you? Tell us all about it." Last came a little feeble squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know. No more, thank you. I'm better now. But I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I goes like a skyrocket." "So you did, old fellow," said the others. "We must burn the house down," said the rabbit's voice. And Alice called out as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dinah on you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take this roof off." After a minute or two, they began moving about, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do to begin with." A barrowful of what? thought Alice. But she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted, "You better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. "If I eat one of these cakes," she thought, It's sure to make some change in my size. As it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose. So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get to the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard Bill was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs, who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself as she wandered about in the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that would be the best plan." It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea of how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes and feebly stretching out one paw trying to touch her. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing tone. She tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened at the time at the thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up, in spite of all her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped in the air off all its feet at once with a yelp of delight and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and at the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get a hold of it. Then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game of play with a cart horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran round the thistle again. Then the little puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forwards each time, and a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the time, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its huge tongue hanging out of its mouth, and its great eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once, and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. "And yet what a dear little puppy it was," said Alice, as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself, and fanned herself with one of the leaves. "I should have liked teaching it tricks very much if only it had been the right size. To do it, oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see, how is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something, but the great question is what?" The great question certainly was what. Alice looked around her at all the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she had looked under it, and on both sides, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on the top, with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. Chapter 5. Advice from a Caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see." "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "You haven't found it so yet," said Alice, "but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will some day, you know, and then after that into a butterfly, I should think you'll find it a little queer, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feelings may be different," said Alice. The caterpillar contemptuously. "Who are you?" Which brought them back again to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillar's making such very short remarks. She drew herself up and said very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." Why? Said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, and the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. Come back, the caterpillar called after her. I've something important to say. This sounded promising. Certainly, Alice turned and came back again. Keep your temper, said the caterpillar. Is that all? Said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. No, said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps, after all, it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the hook out of its mouth again, and said, So you think you're changed, do you? I'm afraid I am, sir, said Alice. I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes altogether. Can't remember what things, said the caterpillar. Well, I've tried to say, how doth the little busy bee, but it all came out different, Alice replied in a very melancholy voice. Repeat, you are old, Father William, said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. You are old, Father William, the young man said, and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right? In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that? In my youth, said the sage, as he shook his grey locks, I kept all my limbs very supple. By the use of this ointment, 1 shilling the box. Allow me to sell you a couple. You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than suet. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said his father, I took to the law and argued each cause with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life. You are old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever. Yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs. That is not said right, said the caterpillar. Not quite right, I'm afraid, said Alice timidly. Some of the words have got altered. It is wrong from beginning to end, said the caterpillar decidedly, and there was silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was the first to speak. What size do you want to be? It asked. Oh, I'm not particular as to a size, Alice hastily replied. Only one that doesn't like changing so often, you know. I don't know, said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in all her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Are you content now? Said the caterpillar. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar, angrily rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I'm not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in a piteous tone, and she thought to herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. You'll get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and it put the hook into its mouth and began smoking again. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two, the caterpillar took the hook out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went, One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as if she'd asked it out loud, and in another moment it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the 2 sides of it, and as it was perfectly round, she found this a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched her arms as round it as far as they would go, and broke off a piece of the edge with each hand. And now which is which, she said to herself, and nibbled the lip of the right-hand bit to find the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit. "Come, my head's free at last," said Alice, in a tone of delight which changed into alarm in another moment, when she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of grass leaves that lay far below her. "What can all that green stuff be?" said Alice, "and where have my shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it I can't see you?" She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking among the distant green leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about as easily in any direction like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in among the leaves, which she found to be nothing but the tops of the trees under which she had been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating her violently with its wings. "Serpent!" screamed the pigeon. "I am not a serpent," Alice said indignantly. "Let me alone." "Serpent, I say again," repeated the pigeon, but in a more subdued tone, and added with a kind of a sob, "I've tried every which way, but nothing seems to suit them." "I haven't the least idea what you're talking about," said Alice. "I've tried the roots of trees, and I've tried banks, and I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on, without attending to her, "but those serpents, there's no pleasing them." Alice was more and more puzzled, but she thought there was no use in saying anything more until the pigeon had finished. "As if it wasn't trouble enough hatching the eggs," said the pigeon. "But I must be on the lookout for serpents day and night. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep these 3 weeks." "I'm very sorry you've been annoyed," said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. "And just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood," continued the pigeon, raising his voice to a shriek, "and just as I was thinking I should be free of them at last, they must needs come wiggling out of the sky. Oh, serpent!" "But I'm not a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a... "Well, what are you?" said the pigeon. "I can see you're trying to invent something." I'm a little girl," said Alice rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she'd gone through that day. "A likely story indeed," said the pigeon, in a tone in the deepest content. "I've seen a good many little girls in my day, but never one with such a neck as that. No, no. You're a serpent, and there's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you never tasted an egg." "I have tasted eggs, certainly," said Alice, who was quite a truthful child. "But little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know." "I don't believe it," said the pigeon. "But if they do, why, then they're a kind of serpent. That's all I can say." This was such a new idea to Alice that she was quite silent for a minute or two, which gave the pigeon the opportunity of adding, "You're looking for eggs. I know that well enough. And what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent?" "It matters a good deal to me," said Alice hastily, "but I'm not looking for eggs as it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw." "Well, be off then," said the pigeon in a sulky tone, as it settled down again into its nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anywhere near the right size that it felt quite strange at first, but then she got used to it in a few minutes, and began talking to herself as usual. "Come, there's half my plan down now. How puzzling all these changes are! I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder?" And as she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place with a little house in it about 4 feet high. "Whoever lives there," thought Alice, "it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits." So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house until she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. Chapter 6. Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house, and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish. And rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery with a round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about, and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter nearly as large as himself, and this he handed over to the other, saying in a great solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman replied in the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little. From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet. Then they both bowed low, and their curls got entangled together. Alice laughed so much at this she had to run back in the wood for fear of their hearing her. And when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. There's no sort of use in knocking, said the footman, and that for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are. Secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, no one could possibly hear you. And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within. A constant howling and sneezing, and every once in a while a great crash, as if a dish or kettle had been broken to pieces. Please then, said Alice, how am I to get in? There might be some sense in your knocking, the footman went on, without attending to her. If we had the door between us, for instance, if you were inside, you might knock, and I could let you out, you know. He was looking up into the sky all the time he was speaking, and this thought Alice decidedly uncivil. But perhaps he can't help it, she said to herself. His eyes are so very nearly at the top of his head. But at any rate, he might answer questions. How am I to get in? She repeated aloud. I shall sit here, the footman remarked, till tomorrow. At this moment the door of the house opened, and a large plate kept skimming out straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose and broke into pieces against one of the trees behind him. Or next day, maybe, the footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened. How am I to get in? Asked Alice again in a louder tone. Are you to get in at all? Said the footman. That's the first question, you know. It was no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. It's really dreadful, she muttered to herself, the way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy. The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark with variations. I shall sit here, he said, on and off for days and days. What am I to do? Said Alice. Anything you like, said the footman, and began whistling. Oh, there's no use in talking to him, said Alice desperately. He's perfectly idiotic. And she opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a 3-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. There's certainly too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself as well as she could, sneezing. There was certainly so much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally. And as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only 2 creatures in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat, which was lying on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. Please, would you tell me, said Alice a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, why your cat grins like that? It's a Cheshire cat, said the Duchess, and that's why. Pig! She said the last word with such violence that Alice quite jumped. But she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby and not to her, so she took courage and went on again. I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin. They all can, said the Duchess, and most of them do. I don't know of any that do, Alice said very politely, feeling quite pleased to have gotten into a conversation. You don't know much, said the Duchess, and that's a fact. Alice did not at all like the tone of this remark, and thought it would be as well to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. Oh, please mind what you're doing, cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror. Oh, there goes his precious nose, as an unusually large saucepan flew close by and very nearly carried it off. If everybody minded their own business, said the Duchess in a hoarse growl, the world would go round a great deal faster than it does. Which would not be an advantage, said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity of showing off a little of her knowledge. Just think what work it would be with the day and night. You see, the earth takes 24 hours to turn round on its axis. Talking of axes, said the Duchess, chop off her head. Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busy stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening, so she went on again. 24 hours, I think, or is it 12? Oh, don't bother me, said the Duchess. I never could abide figures. And with that, she began nursing her child, again singing in a sort of lullaby to it as she did. and giving it a violent shake at the end of each, every line. Speak roughly to your little boy, and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because you know it teases. Chorus, in which the Hook and the baby joined. Wow, wow, wow. When the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words. I speak severely to my boy, I beat him when he sneezes, for he can thoroughly enjoy the pepper when he pleases. Wow, wow, wow. Here, you may nurse it a bit if you like, the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen. And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her after she went, but just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions. Just like a starfish, thought Alice. The poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether for the first minute or two it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she had made out the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up into a sort of knot, and then keep tight hold of its right ear and left foot so as to prevent it undoing itself, she carried it out in the open air. If I don't take this child away with me, thought Alice, they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind? She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. It had left off sneezing by this time. Don't grunt, said Alice. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself. The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what was the matter with it. There could be no doubt that it had a very turn-up nose, much more like a snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. Altogether, Alice did not like the look of the thing at all. But perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and looked into its eyes again to see if there were any tears. No, there were no tears. If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, said Alice seriously, I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now. The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted. It was impossible to say which, and they went on for some time in silence. Alice was just beginning to think of herself, now what am I to do with this creature when I get home? When it grunted again so violently, she looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig, and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it any further. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made it dreadfully ugly, I think. And she began thinking over other children she knew who might do very well as pigs, and was just saying to herself, if one only knew... Oops. Sorry about that. Somehow my pages jumped. It says, if one only knew the right way to change them. When she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began rather timidly, as she did not at all know whether it would like the name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Come, it's pleased so far, thought Alice, and she went on. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. As long as I get somewhere, Alice said as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if only you walk long enough. Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live about here? In that direction, the cat said, waving its right paw around, lives a hatter. And in that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do you know I'm mad, said Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. Alice didn't think that proved it at all. However, she went on. And how do you know that you're mad? To begin with, said the cat, a dog's not mad, you grant that? I suppose so, said Alice. Well, then, said the cat, went on. You see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now, I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad. I call it purring, not growling, said Alice. Call it what you like, said the cat. Do you play croquet with the Queen today? I should like it very much, said Alice, but I haven't been invited. You'll see me there, said the cat, and vanished. Alice was not much surprised. She was getting so well used to queer things happening. While she was still looking at the place where it had been, it suddenly appeared again. By the by, what became of the baby, said the cat. I'd nearly forgotten to ask. It turned into a pig, Alice answered very quietly, just as if the cat had come back in a natural way. I thought it would, said the cat, and vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear. And after a minute or two, she walked on the direction in which the March Hare was said to live. I've seen hatters, she said to herself. The March Hare will be the more interesting, and perhaps as this is May, it won't be raving mad. At least not so mad as it was in March. As she said this, she looked up, and there was the cat again sitting on the branch of a pea. Did you say pig or fig? Said the cat. I said pig, replied Alice, and I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddly. All right, said the cat, and this time it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of its tail and ending with a grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, thought Alice, but a grin without a cat, it's the most curious thing I've ever saw in all my life. She had not gotten much further before she came in sight of the house of the March Hare. She thought it must be the right house, because the chimneys were shaped like ears, and the roof was thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go nearer until she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom and raised herself to about 2 feet high. Even then she walked towards it, rather timidly, saying to herself, Suppose it should be raving mad after all. I almost wish I'd gone to see the Hatter instead. Chapter 7. Well, it is mad after all. A mad tea party. There was a table set out under the tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it and talking over its head. Very uncomfortable for the dormouse, thought Alice. Only as it's asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind. The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it. No room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. Have some wine, the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all around the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine, she remarked. There isn't any, said the March Hare. Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it, said Alice angrily. It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited, said the March Hare. I didn't know it was your table, said Alice. It's laid for a great many more than 3. Your hair wants cutting, said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech. You should learn to not make personal remarks, said Alice with some severity. It's very rude. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, Why is a raven like a writing desk? Come, we shall have some fun now, thought Alice. I'm glad they've begun asking riddles. I believe I can guess that, she said aloud. Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it, said the March Hare. Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean, the March Hare went on. I do, Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. Not the same thing at all, a bit, said the Hatter. Why, you might as well say that I see what I eat is the same as I eat what I see. You might just as well say, added the March Hare, that I like what I get is the same as I get what I like. You might just as well say, added the Dormouse, which seemed to be talking in its sleep, that I breathe when I sleep is the same as I sleep when I breathe. It is the same with you, said the Hatter, and here the conversation dropped, and the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. What day of the month is it? He said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it every now and then and holding it to its ear. Alice considered a little and said, The 4th. 2 days wrong, said the Hatter. I told you butter wouldn't suit the works, he said, looking angrily at the March Hare. It was the best butter, the March Hare meekly replied. Yes, but some crumbs must have got in as well, the Hatter grumbled. You shouldn't have put it in with a bread knife. The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily. Then he dipped it into his cup of tea and looked at it again. But he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark. It was the best butter, you know. Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. What a funny watch, she remarked. It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is. Why should it? Muttered the Hatter. Does your watch tell you what year it is? Well, of course not, Alice replied very readily. But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time altogether. Which is just the case with mine, said the Hatter. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to her to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly English. I don't quite understand you, she said as politely as she could. The Dormouse is asleep again, said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said without opening its eyes, of course, just what I was going to remark myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said, turning at Alice again. No, I give up, Alice replied. What's the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Nor I, said the March Hare. Alice sighed wearily. I think you might do something better with the time, she said, than wasting it and asking riddles that have no answer. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him. I don't know what you mean, said Alice. Of course you don't, the Hatter said, tossing his head contemptuously. I dare say you've never spoken to time. Perhaps not, Alice cautiously replied. But I know I have to beat time when I learn music. Ah, that accounts for it, said the Hatter. He won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you'd like with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just in time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hit to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner. I only wish it was, the March Hare said to itself in a whisper. That would be grand, certainly, said Alice thoughtfully. But then I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know. Not at first, perhaps, said the Hatter, but you could keep it to 1:30 as long as you liked. Is that the way you manage? Alice asked. The Hatter shook its head mournfully. Not I. We quarreled last March, just before he went mad, you know, pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare. It was at the great concert big given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. You know the song, perhaps. I've heard something like it, said Alice. It goes on, you know, the Hatter replied in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep. Twinkle, 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 and went on so long they had to pinch it to make it stop. Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse, said the Hatter, when the Queen bawled out, He's murdering the time off with his head. How dreadfully savage, exclaimed Alice. And ever since then, the Hatter went on, in a mournful tone, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock. A bright idea came into Alice's head. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? She asked. Yes, that's it, said the Hatter with a sigh. It's always tea time, and we've got no time to wash things between whiles. Then you keep moving round, I suppose, said Alice. Exactly so, said the Hatter, as the things get used up. But what happens when you come round to the beginning again? Alice ventured to ask. Suppose we change the subject, the March Hare interrupted, yawning. I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tells us a story. I'm afraid I don't know one, said Alice, rather alarmed at the proposal. Then the Dormouse shall, they both cried. Wake up the Dormouse, and they pinched it on both sides at once. The Dormouse slowly opened its eyes. I wasn't asleep, it said in a hoarse, feeble voice. I heard every word you fellows were saying. Tell us a story, said the March Hare. Yes, please do, pleaded Alice. And be quick about it, said the Hatter, or you'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time there were 3 little sisters, the Dormouse began in a great hurry, and their names were Elsie, Lacie, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well. What did they live on? Said Alice, who always took a great interest in questions of eating and drinking. They lived on treacle, said the Dormouse, after thinking a moment or two. They couldn't have done that, you know, Alice gently remarked. They'd have been ill. So they were, said the Dormouse, very ill. Alice tried a little fancy to herself what such an extraordinary way of living would be like, but it puzzled her too much, so she went on. But why did they live at the bottom of a well? Take some more tea, the March Hare said to Alice very earnestly. I've had nothing yet, Alice replied in an offended tone, so I can't take more. You mean you can't take less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. Nobody asked your opinion, said Alice. Who's making personal remarks now, the Hatter replied, asked triumphantly. Alice did not quite know what to say to this, so she helped herself to some tea and bread and butter, and then turned to the Dormouse and repeated her question. Why did they live at the bottom of a well? The Dormouse again took a minute or two to think about it and said, It was a treacle well. There's no such thing, Alice was beginning very angrily, but the Hatter and the March Hare went, Shh, shh, and the Dormouse sulkily remarked, If you can't be civil, you better finish the story for yourself. No, please go on, Alice said very humbly. I won't interrupt you again. I dare say there may be one. One indeed, said the Dormouse indignantly. However, he consented to go on. And so these three little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know. What did they draw? Said Alice, quite forgetting her promise. Treacle, said the Dormouse, without considering at all this time. I want a clean cup, interrupted the Hatter. Let's all move one place on. He moved on as he spoke, and the Dormouse followed him. The March Hare moved up into the Dormouse's place, and Alice rather unwillingly took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got any advantage from the change, and Alice was a good deal worse off than before, as the March Hare had just upset the milk jug into his plate. Alice did not wish to offend the Dormouse again, so she began very cautiously, But I don't understand. Where did they draw the treacle from? Well, you could draw water out of a water well, said the Hatter, so I should think you could draw treacle out of a treacle well. Eh, stupid? But they were in the well, said Alice to the Dormouse, not choosing to notice this last remark. Of course they were, said the Dormouse, well in. This answer so confused poor Alice that she let the Dormouse go on for some time without interrupting it. But they were hearing to draw, the Dormouse went on yawning and rubbing its eyes, for all it was getting very sleepy, and they drew all manner of things, everything that begins with an M. Why with an M? Said Alice. Why not? Said the March Hare. Alice was silent. The Dormouse had closed its eyes by this time and was going off into a doze, but on being pinched by the Hatter, it woke up again with a little shriek and went on, That begins with an M, such as mousetraps and the moon and memory and a muchness. You know, you say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness? Really, now you ask me, said Alice, very confused. I don't think. Then you shouldn't talk, said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, although she looked back once or twice, half hoping they would call after her. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. At any rate, I'll never go there again, said Alice as she picked her way through the wood. It's the stupidest tea party I was ever at, and it's all my life. Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought, but everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once. And in she went. Once more she found herself in the long hall and close to the little glass table. Now I'll manage better this time, she said to herself, and began by taking the little golden tea and unlocking the door that led into the garden. Then she set to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket, till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. Chapter 8, Queen's Croquet Ground. Anybody want to say anything before we go further?
No, I'm quite happy.
Okay.
The only thing I will say is I nipped out into the kitchen to refuel the TARDIS during the speak roughly to your little boy. That whole thing, especially the transformation into the pig afterwards, and I'll tell you for why. Purely and simply because when I was growing up, that little bit of the story was given 2 spins. One was, I have my mum, my dad, and my aunt, or rather my godmother, to thank for this. Part 1 of the spin was the little boy turning into a little pig. Was, little boys' tendencies to grow up into little chauvinists. And the second twist, the second little twist that was given, interpretive twist, was that, yes, well, treat them like that when they're kids, and what do you expect?
Yeah, that was not one of my favorite parts of Alice, because I didn't like the idea of a child being mistreated, even if it was a pig.
Yeah,
Didn't like a pig being mistreated either.
Yeah, I mean the reason why I opted to go and refuel the TARDIS was purely and simply because I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the story, and I knew that at that point I probably would have to say something. Yeah, not that it harbours any bad memories or anything for me, but it's just one of those little revelations that, yeah, you kind of get on reflection and you think, well, actually, yeah, I can see both of those spins. So it is worth mentioning, but not worth breaking the flow of the tale for me.
Somebody's just doc dropped someone on my channel, so I might have to block them.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Hate that.
People just don't get it, do
Just
they?
remove them. I'm not going to say who and who done what. It's just really fucking annoyed me. It's like, why have you done that, dick?
I'm surprised that channel's lasted as long as it has.
If you're going to doc drop someone, if you must doc drop someone, do it on your own damn channel.
Well,
actually, I have a theory as to why Mim's been so lucky with this, or rather, less unsuccessful with this channel, and that is, you've been putting out better content, dude.
Oh, really?
Seriously, you've actually been putting out content rather than bitch slaps.
Yeah. I'm not afraid of the occasional bitch slap, but
yeah, I know, but I mean, you know, this is kind of an unfortunate side effect of some of the dramas you have been involved with over the past.
Yeah.
But now that you've been actually, you know, making content and appearing in these hangouts, and people are actually getting to know a little bit of, you know, the real slut, it's kind of casting you in a different light. Do you know what I mean?
And you do appear to be pregnant, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, people always, you know, I mean, yeah, there's a reason why pregnant women get deference.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not me that was doc dropped. It was someone else. I'm assuming. I'm not going to say who, but it's someone I'm not very fond of anyway who was doc dropped. But the point is, why bring it? Why? It's a video about nothing to do with that. It's like, why?
Because
never mind. It just enraged me a bit. Like,
yeah, because, you know, yeah, all I have to do is just, you know, just drop Mim a little favour, and he's going to watch it, do it, and he's going to go off on one.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say anything publicly.
Either at me for doc dropping him, or off on the person that I've just doc dropped to him for further investigation.
Yeah.
Maybe they knew you didn't like the person, and you thought you were going to go for it.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the doc dropping. It could be absolutely anything from a phone number to, you know, the person's life story or a page on the web with it. I don't know. I don't care. But
or a picture of them with a banana in a strange place.
Yeah, or photoshopped in with.
I won't say what it was, but because it's not fair to that person. But it's enough to find enough about them that you know. Yeah, so I wouldn't want it done to me. So.
No, so leave it there. Exactly. Hey, IG, how you doing?
Hey guys.
Howdy.
I'm muted.
No, you're good.
Yeah, how are you feeling today?
How's your face?
It hurts, dude.
Oh, dude.
I have this weird. If I'm talking funny, it's because I have this weird, like, putty stuff that's covering the roof of my mouth where they took the graft from.
Eek.
And so yeah, I mean it my face feels swollen, you know, for obvious reasons, and it doesn't hurt so much as it feels like it feels like what I had done to me, you know.
It feels like
yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because I'm on pain meds. So the pain, I don't have pain unless I wait too long to take my medication. But yeah, my face, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like it's been altered, because it has. So,
Yeah.
and I gotta tell him next time not to pull so hard on my lips and cheek, because the corner of the right side of my mouth hurts because of the pulling, to pull the cheek away from what they were doing, and So we'll see what happens with work tomorrow. I'm gonna go up there and clock in on time because I don't want to get any points against me, and then I'm gonna go to first aid and I'm gonna explain what I've had done, and we'll see what happens. They'll probably send me home. So, but I don't want, because at my job, if you're late or you call in sick, you get points, and it goes on your employee record.
Are you winning by points?
What?
Are you winning?
No. You get so many points and they let you go.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, IJ, I was being silly there. What's actually wrong, though?
I have to have a dental implant on my right canine.
Ouch.
And I don't have enough bone or tissue there for the implant to hold. Well, he says that he could probably put one in really high up, but he'd rather do a tissue graft and then a bone graft to make sure there's enough stuff there for the implant to stay for a long period of time. He said he could just do the implant now, but in 10 years, if I lost much more of the tissue, I could lose the implant. So instead of waiting for that to happen, he said, well, why don't we just do a tissue graft and bone graft now? Then that way, you won't have to worry about this ever again, And like a dumbass, I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
So
I had a root
I
canal
had
thing
my
once.
first surgery yesterday, and then I go in, he's going to check it on Tuesday, and then this should heal up, he says, within 3 weeks or a month. And then I go back and they do a bone graft, which is where they're going to take a piece of bone out of my palate and put it underneath this tissue that he's just grafted over. And then after that heals, I have my implant put in. So,
ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of fun.
And I have my grandfather to thank for these wonderful teeth I have.
Well, at least you're not British.
Well, I'm Irish, so my teeth are.
Well, but usually an Irishman by your age doesn't have any teeth for all the fist fights.
Well, my grandfather didn't have any of his own teeth at my age, so. Because it
you're doing better.
Yeah, I'm doing much better. Yeah, I still have 70% of my teeth. So I mean, yeah, granted, a lot of them are crowns, but I still have them. So
yeah, it's not nice. Tooth is one of the worst pains. That and burns are the worst. You just can't stop them.
Yeah, so I'm hoping at work they'll give me like some desk work or something.
Drugs.
Well, they already gave me drugs at the dentist, so.
Yeah, I think he's good for drugs.
Yeah, and
get you a discount.
But they don't let in my job. I can't be on any medication and operate, company vehicles.
Just don't tell them.
And that's kind of I have to.
Yeah, if you don't tell them, they kind of sack you because it's a breach of contract.
Yeah, it's a liability.
And if they find out.
Issue.
Yeah.
They do random drug tests.
Yeah.
They don't do
that would be the time.
And I'd much rather just, be on board and have everything above board with them, and because I'm hoping to get promoted at the end of this season. So.
You don't get sick notes in America, no?
What?
6 certificates from the doctor to tell you that you're unfit to work.
Yeah, well, he told my dentist told me that he would write me a note, and would would interact with my employer if there were any issues, because my dentist is actually really cool. He's a really nice guy. So when I told him my situation, he's like, "Well, you're going to need pain drugs." He's like, "There's no way around it." He's like, "You're going to need it." And so don't think that you can just skate by on ibuprofen, because he's like, "I don't want you in that much pain, and you don't want you in that much pain." So I was like, okay.
He wants to sell you something more expensive. It's a conspiracy.
No, I've got pretty good health coverage, so my medication was dirt cheap. I got the big ibuprofens, Vicodin, and antibiotics for less than $10. So.
I was going to make a really crap joke about having a doctor's note. Well, I won't now. It's a bit distasteful.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, it's rubbish now, and I've built it up, and it's really not going to work.
Back in a minute, I just need to get something to eat.
So what do you guys think of the drama between Agent of Doubt and Happy Cabby?
Yeah.
Have you seen any of that?
It's crazy. What the hell? It just came out of nowhere.
That is ridiculous. I don't understand what on earth. I was going to say I don't understand what on earth is up with Happy Cabby, but hey, I never did, so.
What's with the balloons?
Oh, he does all those balloon things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, was he a clown in a past life or something?
But the drama is definitely odd. I was just a bit like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much, when I watch those videos, even I was kind of like, wow, he's covering all these weird, underage girl porn type stuff. And then I realized, oh, well, he's just reporting. Okay. He's not supporting any of this stuff. He's just doing a good reporting job. He's, he doesn't. Yeah,
It's just odd that Happy Cabby should, of all people, go after Agent of Doubt. Not that Agent of Doubt's some angel or anything. He seems quite low key for someone of Happy Cabby's stature.
There's a couple other videos in the hiding in the woods about Happy Cabby possibly having some kind of personal umbrage because Agent of Doubt shouted out Nick Bravo or covered Nick Bravo in one of the, flaggings of the week.
But then again, I've done the same with Nick Bravo, and never. It's just strange why he picks him out.
Yeah, I don't know. And he was trying to get him on the because the icon of the video is the circle with the line through it and false flagging. Now, I don't see that as a condemnation of flagging. I see it as a condemnation of false flagging.
Yeah, or just merely just a symbol that was first at hand. I don't see any connotation there at all to anything negative or positive. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh well, I'm staying out of that one.
Probably
I'm staying out of it too. I thought about doing a video supporting Mike because, I just wanted to reiterate that I never for once thought that he was supporting anyone or bashing anyone. He was just reporting the flags, and that's what that video series does: is tell you who got flagged and why, or possibly why.
Yeah.
Or what that person thinks why they were flagged. It's never his opinion, it's somebody else's opinion that he repeats.
Yeah.
Right, and he covers people that he does not like, or
he does
particularly like. Because it's just about flagging. It's not whether you like someone or not, or whether you think someone's scum or not, because he's been very clear in some of these flagging that he finds some things very distasteful, but he still reports that they've been flagged. And he even went after the foot fetish guy. He found it, apparently.
Yeah,
who was that, by the way?
I don't think we know.
We don't know, but Agent of Doubt apparently did track him down and did report him.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
He was convincing young people, minors, to do stuff and then he'd flag it. Yeah.
Cuckoo.
Yeah.
I mean, Agent Adele also, I mean, he's repeated, say, I mean, just an example I'm going to make up because I can't remember verbatim, but for example, he would have said something like, Thick Shades was flagged, and he's blaming Mimica. And I've never taken umbrage with that, because he's just repeating what Thick Shades said. It's not like, oh, well, you're on Thick Shade's side now. It's such a childish attitude for someone, especially Happy Cabby, of all the people who he's described as a bit bigger than that. Excuse me.
Well, I think I think Cabby jumped the gun. I think he got pissed because Nick Bravo was getting some airtime, and then he tried to make the connection between, all flaggings are false flaggings, and Mike never said that. Mike was never making that connection, So.
Never made any point really from anything that's happened due to flagging. It's just merely stated what has happened.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was distracted for a minute there because I was looking at Hook's thingy, and I thought for a minute that was Ashes the Raven.
What?
No,
I just looked for a minute and I said, what?
Oh, it's
Jesus is
now.
What is it?
Sure, it's just nothing. It's something completely different.
Can
You had someone up earlier. I think it was Jesus, but I thought for a split, I just kind of caught it out of the corner of my eye and thought it was Ashes the Raven.
No, it's
by name and shame. This dog dropper.
It's the DOT. It's Frank Skinner's new band.
Not on my show.
No problem. It's fine.
But yeah, just as a quick change of pace and just show Jade what I've just done, so that as a transition to going back to her. Look at the cottage now.
Oh, this is your. Has this got the golden rod, golden rake, whatever it was?
The all-powerful golden hoe isn't in here, but
how could you forget Ho?
Ho,
yeah,
ho,
but
ho.
I know. You think
look
with
at
my
these
filthy
bricks,
mind?
aren't they awesome?
Oh, that's
Jade?
nice. Yeah. Oh,
I like what you've done with the patio. Did you bury anyone underneath that?
Shit. We're not supposed to talk about that.
You mean here?
Did you use those builders I used, the ones that like to use the most filthiest language in front of your children?
No, I did it all myself.
Oh, that's why it's a bit wonky.
No, that's just the perspective, point of view, angle. Fish
Should have
eye.
got a pole to do it. They're quite reasonably priced.
Very hard work.
Brian,
I like the fish eye.
how did you get your live events thing working?
Well, the actual live event, this isn't a live event. It turns out that my YouTube account is currently screwed. The only thing I can really do on there effectively is watch videos. And even then, I mean, I can't comment on anything, even my own videos. And while I can upload a video, I can't make it live, I can't monetize it, demonetize it, I can't give it a description, put any tags on it, none of that. So
I said to Glue that he should maybe update his Adobe and his Java, because that usually sorts it out, but he said he's done.
I've done all of those.
Yeah. It's really weird. And why is it affecting you, Brian, but not me? And we're fairly local to each other.
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. The only thing I can think of, because somebody did, who was it? Was it Trollolin? Went on the boards. But isn't this nice? Isn't this beautiful? This cottage.
Is that a thatched roof?
Windmill in the back. Look.
Is that thatched roof there, Brian? Is that slates?
There's very few thatchers left in the.
I'm playing hardcore mode. I'm living in a hole.
No, it's actually an oak roof.
I'm in a 9x9 hole.
This is actually an oak roof. Over here on the black building, there is.
That's not where you keep the slaves, is it?
No, that's spruce.
Well, it says you're streaming live. I mean, that's how I found you guys. It says you're streaming live.
I managed to find a way of doing it through Google Plus. So whilst my YouTube channel is screwed, Google Plus does seem to be functional, even though I do have to do some searching and figure out ways of getting to places and going back to places and starting all over again. But I eventually do find it.
You're on YouTube too, Brian, according to my channel.
Yeah, but this is why I did the Saturday speculation thingy, because that was a test to see if it would actually book into YouTube, given the state of screwedness that my YouTube channel is.
Yeah. So I didn't want to say anything before, because I felt silly. But now IG said it, it's like, oh, I can say it now. I'm getting it too.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
And again, I don't have to say much to sound silly, do I?
But yeah, I decided to go for this white glowy brick.
Can you adorn your cottage with perhaps climbing ivy and maybe some hanging flowers?
Yes, I can. I can actually adorn the building with hanging vines. I haven't thought of doing so yet, but I may do at some point. Particularly over on the other side of the building.
I think the ivy would look lovely. I do like ivy on a building.
You know, down on that wall, I've got a wall that I can actually, make use of and give it that sort of feature. But this is what I like. I've got a cicada. I've got a cicada on my wall. Look, he sings to me in big musical notes that float up into the air.
Oh, that's nice.
What's a cicada? I sound very ignorant now.
A cricket. It's like a cricket. It's a Chinese, Asian cricket.
Okay.
Well, actually, we have them here in the United States.
Yeah, you also get them in Central America as well.
I've only seen
around the Caribbean. Yeah, that was one of the things that I absolutely adored about Jamaica was the frogs and the cicadas.
Noisy fuckers they are as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't know whether it was just the fact that we were on our honeymoon or what, but even during the tenser moments, and there were a few, just chilling on a hammock, listening to those little critters had exactly the same emotional effect as listening to a brook.
It is beautiful. Now I know what they're called. Yeah.
The first time I heard them was in Shanghai, and I actually thought they were coming for a speaker system in the park. It was a park in the centre of the city, and there was like Holiday Inns and skyscrapers all around, and I was doing my Tai Chi in the park, and I heard this noise, and I seen speakers, like loudspeakers, they would get at the top of a pole, for announcements and stuff, and I actually thought that's where the noise was coming from the first time I heard it.
Wow. Yeah.
Because they all crack at the same time, like.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I like about these cicadas, as you can see, the music is nice and visible, and it doesn't just, so you can go and appreciate it. It doesn't become invasive.
So are these the crickets that live in North America that make that kind of cricket sound at night?
Well, yeah, we have regular crickets.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we also have the cicadas, and they're currently all over the East Coast. They're the 17-year cicada. They used to be called the 17-year locust. They show up only every 17 years. They spend the rest of their time underground, and currently they are all over the East Coast. Well, not all over, because they're around North Carolina, I think.
But I also have these glow bugs on the wall, these fire bugs. These are particularly awesome as well.
Hey guys.
I know why they glow.
Sorry about that.
Hey, Trelawney.
Hey, Jade.
Hey, Trelawney, sorry.
Hey,
Being very rude.
Hey, Mim.
Hi, Cousin
Hey,
Troll.
guys. How
How
are
you
you?
doing, Trelawney?
Yay! Jade, are they really, really, really loud, those cicadas over there? Because we get ones here, and they are ear cranking, like, they're like, I don't know how loud they are. They're over 100 decibels, man. They're very, very
Yeah,
loud.
they're
Yeah.
like I've never heard them because I live on the West Coast, but apparently they sound like buzzsaws.
Yeah,
Apparently
that's
they're
what I thought. It was a speaker
incredibly
system.
loud.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the
out
one.
there.
Yeah, they are in.
You can go online and look them up. There are lots of videos of the swarm.
Is
that's
it 7
occurring
years
right
or
now.
17 years? I think it's 7 years. they come.
17
They're like-
years.
17.
They
Jeez, 'cause I know
show up
that
every
we had the same
17
thing.
years.
Well, at least they're legal.
Yeah.
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 Hey.
Good grief.
Yeah, every 17 years they show up, they swarm, they mate, they lay eggs, and they die, I guess. I think they die.
They sound a bit like Pennywise, too, the clown.
Trust you, Mim.
Yeah.
You never say no. I'll tell you what, though, we don't get those in Britain or anything like that. At night here, it's pretty much just silent, dead still. Apart from in summer,
Well,
you might
you
hear
say
frog.
that. You say that. I can remember a couple of summers back in the 70s. There was a particularly
When it
hot
was
summer.
hot.
Yeah,
A
the
couple of summers back in the TARDIS.
76 and 77.
That was it. 76, 77.
When Elvis died.
That year we did a canal holiday, and although they weren't cicadas, we did hear crickets, and we heard a lot of crickets.
So I love that sound. When I went to America, at night, that's the first thing that captured me, and I just kept recording the sound because it sounded like to me like a Hollywood film. But you always hear it on the films.
Because
You know?
the first.
Oh, the crickets? Yeah.
When I first heard the cicadas, I recognised them as crickets, but they're not quite right. Crickets.
Cricket, Jim, but not as we know.
But yeah, and one of the locals clued me in, and filled me in that it was it was actually cicadas, not crickets, and also what you heard last night were the frogs.
Yeah, frogs, I like them. I'll tell you what else we get here, though. Have you ever seen American Werewolf in London?
Yes.
Yeah.
We do
wow.
get that howl every now and again. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
What was it I heard that the frogs around Hollywood are the ones that go ribbit. They don't go ribbit anywhere else in the world, but when they were making the films, they had to go and record frogs, and that was the noise they got because they're the ones around Hollywood.
Oh
The
yeah,
shriek
isn't that
of the cat, I
a
heard they
specific
speak
type
a
of
lot.
bullfrog?
Yeah, I got it. I heard it in QI, I think, something like that.
Mm.
It's amazing how much information I've learned off of QI.
Also,
Yes,
the
it's a
sound
good
of the
program.
trains in the distance, that train horn, that remember that sound? Well, that was lovely. That's very American.
Down in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, I know, yeah.
We used to
You know the
collect
sound I mean? Like
cicadas.
that, it's very distant, kind of. It's not the sound of the engine. It's like a horn, a very
Yeah, I
American
hear-
sounding horn.
I hear it all
Yeah.
the
Train
time.
horn,
I've
man.
got
Train horn.
a train track on the other side of the valley that I live on, about 12, 15 miles away. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, about 10 after 4 every morning, I can hear it all the way across the valley.
So I can imagine going, but as a tourist, I loved it. I was like, oh wow, this is.
Yeah, well, it doesn't
Yeah.
bother me because it's far away, you know?
Yeah.
Eagle Eye 1975. He's one of his latest garden update videos. You can hear them going off in the background, and in fact, he cusses them out. But it is a very unique train signal, because when you hear it, the image you automatically get is those transcontinental huge double-decker trains.
Oh, they're massive as well. The trains are huge.
Yeah.
We get ones that are like 30, 40 kilometres long here, man. That was mad in Perth. And there'd be like 15 diesel fronts on the front. Each front end is 5,000 horsepower, each one, times 15. And they go, you can time them for about 40, more than 40 kilometres sometimes, man. And
Yeah,
they go
the other mental images you get is hobos jumping on and off the open carts.
Also,
And
that is about as long as England.
yeah, and what's the other one?
We get Thomas the Tank Engine here. That's it.
Oh yes,
Over the engine.
the generic scene from Starsky and Hutch and Kojak and everything, where you've got the
Very
chases
cool.
going off on the tracks in the what's it yard.
Yeah, you could actually walk down the tracks in America too. You could just walk down the railway track. I was like, oh, that's a bit dangerous.
Well,
They're
we'll
all
fool you
dangerous.
if you get killed. That's the attitude over there. Over here, it's a case of, oh yeah, we got to protect those crossings.
So I so want to walk down it like River Phoenix. Stand by me. I won't.
Well, a lot of places we have the trains don't go very often, so we can,
Yeah, that's like Britain.
and the like here we actually still have a train track that's near the coast, but the trains go so rarely. Mostly it's used by joggers and hike. There's actually a jogging and bike path right next to it.
I've been on the Amtrak once.
It's rail. It's useless.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Been on the Amtrak once from New York to New England. It's the only time I've been there.
I've been on the Scottish Underground in Glasgow. That is very miniature.
Ah,
It was
is that
great.
not an underpass? You know what I mean, the underpass?
Stop off and have a pint at every stop. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
What's really fun is if you ever have been on a gravity train. Anybody here ever been on a gravity train?
No,
Is that
I've
one
been
of the
on-
ones that hangs down?
There's no
No,
such
Oh no,
thing.
it's a monorail, isn't it?
You know, there is. Gravity trains were used for mining, and basically they would haul the train up the hill, load it, but now they're used for sightseers. You can go. We've got a couple of them here in California, and they basically just let them go. Gravity brought them down because it doesn't take that much energy to take up empty cars, and the gravity would bring them down. They're used for mining and logging, and they only had a brake on them.
Right. So basically,
So a gravity train ride is.
So basically,
Momentum
here's this
trains.
metal box. Jump in it, and we're gonna just let it roll down the thing. And yeah, God help you if it doesn't stop.
Sounds like
Yeah, yeah. And it's a fun ride. Of course, nowadays they're more technology is better. But you know that's basically how cable cars work.
Is the word you're looking
No, that's why the
for
cable car has a brakeman.
controlled?
That's how you
Nowadays-
slow and stop a cable car is by the brake.
Nowadays, they're a little more controlled, perhaps. One hopes.
No, they still have a brakeman. That's one of the reasons that most of the brakemen are men, not women, because women aren't strong enough to control the brake.
we have those here too, but they always restrict them to theme parks, unfortunately.
You see some of the Australian women then, Jade. Jesus.
Well,
So yeah, that happened. Getting back to Alice.
okay,
we
we
need
had a little break.
Who the fuck is Alice?
Yeah.
In one
I had to do it. I had to do it. I had to-
I'm doing a rating today of Alice.
Okay, were you ready?
Yeah.
Everybody
Yes.
ready to go back to Alice? Okay. Chapter 8, The Queen's Croquet Ground. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this a very curious thing, as she went nearer to watch them, and just as she came up to them, she heard one of them say, "Look out now, 5! Don't go splashing paint over me like that." "I couldn't help it," said 5 in a sulky tone. 7 jogged my elbow. On which 7 looked up and said, "That's right, 5. Always lay the blame on others." "You'd better not talk," said 5. "I heard the Queen said only yesterday you deserve to be beheaded." "What for?" said the one who had spoken first. "That's none of your business, too," said 7. "Yes, it is his business," said 5, "and I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cooked tulip roots instead of onions." 7 flung down his brush and had just begun, "Well, of all the unjust things," when his eye chanced to fall on Alice as she stood watching them, and he checked himself. Suddenly. The others looked round also, all of them bowed low. "Would you tell me, please," said Alice, a little timidly, "why you were painting those roses?" 5 and 7 said nothing, but looked at 2. 2 began in a low voice. "Why, the fact is, you see, miss, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. Then if the Queen was to find it out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So you see, miss, we're doing our best before she comes to." At this moment 5, who had been anxiously looking around the garden, called out, "The Queen! The Queen!" And the 3 gardeners instantly threw themselves flat on their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked round, eager to see the Queen. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the 3 gardeners, oblong and flat, with their hands and feet at the corners. Next came the 10 courtiers. These were ornamented all over with diamonds and walked 2 and 2 as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, and the little dears came jumping merrily along, hand in hand in couples. They were all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the White Rabbit. It was talking in a hurried, nervous manner, smiling at everything that was said, and went by without noticing her. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion. And last of all this grand procession came the King and Queen of Hearts. Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the 3 gardeners. But she could not remember ever having heard of such a rule at processions. And besides, what would the use of a procession be, she thought, if people had to all lie down on their faces so they couldn't see it? So she stood where she was and waited. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her, and the Queen said severely, "Who is this?" She said it to the Knave of Hearts, who only bowed and smiled and replied, "Idiot," said the Queen, tossing her head impatiently. And turning to Alice, she went, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, so please your Majesty," said Alice very politely. "But," she added to herself, "why, they're only a pack of cards after all. I need to be afraid of them." "And who are these?" said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners who were lying round the rose tree. For you see, as they were lying on their faces, and the pattern on their backs was the same as the rest of the pack, she could not tell whether they were gardeners, or soldiers, or courtiers, or 3 of her own children. "How should I know?" said Alice, surprised at her own courage. "It's no business of mine." The Queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, began screaming, "Off with her head! Off with—" "Nonsense," said Alice very loudly and decidedly, and the Queen was silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm and timidly said, "Consider, my dear, she is only a child." The Queen turned angrily away from him and said to the Knave, "Turn them over." The Knave did so very carefully with one foot. "Get up!" said the Queen in a shrill, loud voice, and the 3 gardeners instantly jumped up and began bowing to the King, the Queen, the royal children, and everybody else. "Leave off that!" screamed the Queen. "You make me giddy!" And then turning to the rose tree, she went on, "What have you been doing here?" May it please your Majesty," said two in a very humble tone, going down on one knee as he spoke. "We were trying—" "I see," said the Queen, who had meanwhile been examining the roses. "Off with their heads!" And the procession moved on, 3 of the soldiers remaining behind to execute the unfortunate gardeners, who ran to Alice for protection. "You shan't be beheaded," said Alice, and she put them into a large flower pot that stood near. The 3 soldiers wandered about for a minute or 2 looking for them, and then quietly marched off with the others. "Are their heads off?" shouted the Queen. Does somebody want to interrupt her?
Yeah, I was going to say, who's that humming?
We can hear you singing to yourself.
It's okay if you want to. I don't really care. I just, if somebody didn't know if you wanted something. Okay. "Are their heads off?" shouted the Queen. "Their heads are gone, if it please your Majesty," the soldiers shouted in reply. "That's right," shouted the Queen. "Can you play croquet?" The soldiers were silent and looked at Alice, as the question was evidently meant for her. "Yes," shouted Alice. "Come on, then," roared the Queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next. It's a very fine day," said a timid voice at her side. She was walking by the White Rabbit, who was peeping anxiously into her face. "Very," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" "Hush, hush," said the Rabbit in a low, worried tone. He looked anxiously over his shoulder as he spoke, and then raised himself upon tiptoe, put his mouth close to her ear, and whispered, "She's under sentence of execution." "What for?" said Alice. "Did you say what a pity?" the Rabbit asked. "No, I didn't," asked Alice. "I don't think it's all a pity. I said, what for?" "She boxed the Queen's ears," the Rabbit began. Alice gave a little scream of laughter. "Oh, hush," the Rabbit whispered in a frightened tone. "The Queen will hear you." So she came rather late, and the Queen said, "Get to your places," shouted the Queen in a voice of thunder. And people began running around in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they all got settled into a minute or 2, and the game began. Alice thought she'd never seen such a curious croquet ground in her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The croquet balls were live hedgehogs, and the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The chief difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo. She succeeded in getting its body tucked away comfortably enough under her arm, with its legs hanging down, But generally, just as she had got its neck nicely straightened out, was going to give the hedgehog a blow with the head, it would twist itself round and look up at her face with such a puzzled expression that she could not help bursting out laughing. And when she had got its head down and was going to begin again, it was very provoking to find that the hedgehog had unrolled itself and was in the act of crawling away. Besides all this, there was generally a ridge or a furrow in the way, wherever she wanted to send the hedgehog to, and as the double-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground, Alice soon came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed. The players all played at once without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while and fighting for the hedgehogs, and in a very short time the queen was furious passion, and went stamping about shouting, "Off with his head! Off with her head!" about once in a minute. Alice began to feel very uneasy, to be sure. She had not as yet had any dispute with the queen, but she knew that it might happen any minute. And then, thought she, what would become of me? They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive. She was looking about for some way of escape and wondering whether she could get away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin. Then she said to herself, "It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to." "How are you getting on?" said the Cheshire Cat, as soon as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. Alice waited until the eyes appeared and then nodded. "It's no use speaking to it," she thought, "until its ears have come, or at least one of them." In another minute the whole head appeared, and then Alice put down her flamingo and began an account of the game, feeling very glad she had someone to listen to her. The cat seemed to think that there was enough of it now in sight, and no more of it appeared. "I don't think they play fairly at all," Alice began in a rather complaining tone. "They all quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak. And they don't seem to have any rules in particular. At least if there are, nobody attends to them, and you have no idea how confusing it is, all the things being alive. For instance, there's the arch I've got to go through next, walking about at the other end of the ground, and I should have just croqueted the queen's hedgehog just now, only it ran away when it saw mine coming." "How do you like the queen?" said the cat in a low voice. "Not at all," said Alice. "She's so extremely—" Just then she noticed that the queen was close behind her, listening, so she went on, "Likely to win, that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game." The queen smiled and passed on. "Who are you talking to?" said the king, coming up to Alice and looking at the cat's head with great curiosity. "It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire Cat," said Alice. "Allow me to introduce it." "I don't like the look of it at all," said the king. "However, it may kiss my hand if it likes." "I'd rather not," the cat remarked. "Don't be impertinent," said the king. "And don't look at me like that." He got behind Alice as he spoke. "A cat may look at a king," said Alice. "I've read that in a book somewhere, but I don't remember where." "Well, it must be removed," said the king very decidedly, and he called to the queen who was passing by at the moment, "My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed." The queen had only one way of settling all difficulties, great or small. "Off with his head," she said, without even looking round. "I'll fetch the executioner myself," said the king eagerly, and he hurried off. Alice thought she might as well go back and see how the game was going on, as she heard the queen's voice in the distance, screaming with passion. She had already heard her sentence 3 of the players to be executed for having missed their turns, and she did not like the look of things at all, as the game was in such confusion that she never knew whether it was her turn or not. So she went off in search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that her flamingo was gone across the other side of the garden, where Alice could see it trying in a helpless sort of way to fly up into a tree. By the time she had caught the flamingo and brought it back, the fight was over, and both the hedgehogs were out of sight. But it doesn't matter much, thought Alice, as all the archers are gone from this side of the ground. So she tucked it away under her arm, that it might not escape again, and went back to have a little more conversation with her friend. When she got back to the Cheshire Cat, she was surprised to find quite a large crowd collected round it. There was a dispute going on between the executioner, the king, and the queen, who were all talking at once, while the rest were quite silent and looked very uncomfortable. The moment Alice appeared, she was appealed to by all 3 to settle the question, and they repeated their arguments to her. As though they all spoke at once, she found it very hard to make out exactly what they said. The executioner's argument was that you couldn't cut off a head unless there was a body to cut it off from. That he had never had to do such a thing before, and he wasn't going to begin at his time of life. The king's argument was that anything that had a head could be beheaded, and that you weren't to talk nonsense. The Queen's argument was that if something wasn't done about it in less than no time, she'd have executed everybody executed all around. It was this last remark that made the whole party look so grave and anxious. Alice could think of nothing else to say but, "It belongs to the Duchess. You'd better ask her about it." "She's in prison," said the Queen, said the executioner. "Fetch her here." And the executioner went off like an arrow. The cat's head began fading away the moment he was gone, and by the time he had come back with the Duchess, it had entirely disappeared. So the King and the executioner ran wildly up and down looking for it, while the rest of the party went back to the game. Chapter 9. The Mock Turtle Story. "You can't think how glad I am to see you again, you dear old thing," said the Duchess, as she tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that, well, perhaps it was only the pepper that had made her so savage when they met in the kitchen. "When I'm a Duchess," she said to herself, not in a very hopeful tone, though, "I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered," she went on, very much pleased at finding out a new kind of rule. "And vinegar that makes them sour, and chamomile that makes them bitter, and barley sugar and such things that make children sweet-tempered. I only wish people knew that, then they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know." She had quite forgotten the Duchess by this time, and was a little startled when she heard her voice close to her ear. "You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you just now what the moral of that is, but I shall remember it in a bit." "Perhaps it has one," Alice ventured to remark. "Tut, tut, child," said the Duchess. "Everything's got a moral, if only you can find it." And she squeezed herself up closer to Alice's side as she spoke. Alice did not much like her keeping so close to her at first, because the Duchess was very ugly, and secondly because she was exactly the right height to rest her chin on Alice's shoulder, and it was an uncomfortably sharp chin. However, she did not like to be rude, so she bore it as well as she could. "The game's going on rather better now," she said, by way of keeping up the conversation a little. "'Tis so," said the Duchess, "and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round." "Somebody said," Alice whispered, "that it's done by everybody minding their own business." "Ah, well, it means much the same thing," said the Duchess, digging her sharp little chin into Alice's shoulder, as she added, "and the moral of that is, take care of the sense, and the sounds will take care of themselves." How fond she is of finding morals in things, Alice thought to herself. "I dare say you're wondering why I don't put my arm around your waist," the Duchess said, after a pause. "The reason is that I'm doubtful about the temper of your flamingo. Shall I try the experiment?" He might bite," Alice cautiously replied, not feeling at all anxious to have the experiment tried. "Very true," said the Duchess. "Flamingos and mustard both bite, and the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together." "Only mustard isn't a bird," Alice remarked. "Right as usual," said the Duchess. "What a clear way you have of putting things." "It's a mineral, I think," said Alice. "Of course it is," said the Duchess, who seemed ready to agree to everything that Alice said. "There's a large mustard mine near here, and the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours." "Oh, I know!" exclaimed Alice, who had not attended to this last remark. "It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is." "I quite agree with you," said the Duchess, "and the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or, if you'd like it put more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others that what you were, or might have been, was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise." "I think I should understand that better," Alice said very politely, "if I had it written down, but I can't quite follow it as you say it." "That's nothing to what I could say if I chose," the Duchess replied in a pleased tone. "Pray don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that," said Alice. "Oh, don't talk about trouble," said the Duchess. "I make you a present of everything I've said as of yet." A cheap sort of present, thought Alice. I'm glad people don't give birthday presents like that, but she did not venture to say it aloud. "Thinking again," the Duchess said, with another dig of her sharp little chin. "I've a right to think," said Alice sharply, for she was beginning to feel a little worried. "Just about as much right," said the Duchess, "as pigs have to fly, and the But here, to Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's voice died away even in the middle of her favorite word, moral, and the arm that was linked into hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and then stood the Queen in front of them with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm. "Oh, a fine day, Your Majesty," the Duchess began in a low, weak voice. "Now I give you fair warning," shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. Either you or your head must be off, and that is about half no time. Take your choice. The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. Let's go on with the game, the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was much too frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, the Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouting, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being archers to do this, so that by the end of half an hour or so there were no archers left, and all the players except the King and Queen and Alice were in custody and under sentence of execution. Then the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the Mock Turtle yet?" "No," said Alice. "I don't even know what a Mock Turtle yet is." "It's the thing Mock Turtle soup is made from," said the Queen. "I never saw one or heard of one," said Alice. "Come on, then," said the Queen, "and he shall tell you his story." As they walked off together, Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." "Come, that's a good thing," she said to herself, for she felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the Queen had ordered. They very soon came upon a griffin lying fast asleep in the sun. If you don't know what a griffin is, look up at the picture. "Up, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the Mock Turtle and to hear his story, his history. I must go back and see after some executions I have ordered." And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole she thought it would be, well, quite as safe to stay with it as to go after with the savage Queen, so she waited. The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes. Then it watched the Queen till she was out of sight, and it chuckled. "What fun!" said the griffin half to itself, half to Alice. "What is the fun?" said Alice. Why, she," said the griffin. "It's all her fancy. They never execute anybody, you know. Come on." "Everybody says come on here," thought Alice as she went slowly after it. "I was never so ordered about in all my life. Never." They had not gone far before they saw the Mock Turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock, and as they came near, Alice could hear him sighing, as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. "What is his sorrow?" she asked the griffin. And the griffin asked very nearly in the same words as before. "It's all his fancy that he hasn't got no sorrow, you see. Come on." So they went up to the Mock Turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. "This here young lady," said the griffin, "she wants for to know your history, she do." "I'll tell it to her," said the Mock Turtle in a deep, hollow tone. "Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word till I've finished." So they sat down, and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, "I don't see how he could ever finish if he doesn't begin," but she waited patiently. "Once," said the Mock Turtle at last, with a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle." These words were followed by a very long silence, broken only by an occasional exclamation of "Hitchik!" from the griffin, and the constant heavy sobbing of the Mock Turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up and saying, "Thank you, sir, for your interesting story," but she could not help thinking there must be more to come, so she sat still and said nothing. "When we were little," the Mock Turtle went on at last more calmly, so still sobbing a little now and then, "we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise." "Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one?" Alice said. "We called him Tortoise because he taught us." "Really, you are very dull." "You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question," asked the griffin. And then they both sat silent and looked at poor Alice, who felt ready to sink into the earth. At last the griffin said to the Mock Turtle, "Drive on, old fellow, don't be all day about it." And he went on in these words, "Yes, we went to school in the sea, although you mayn't believe it." "I never said I didn't," interrupted Alice. "You did," said the Mock Turtle. "Hold your tongue," added the griffin, before Alice could speak again. The Mock Turtle went on. "We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day." "I've been to a day school, too," said Alice. "You needn't be so proud as all that." "With extras?" asked the Mock Turtle a little anxiously. "Yes, we learned French and music." "And washing?" said the Mock Turtle. "Certainly not," said Alice indignantly. "Ah, then yours wasn't a really good school," said the Mock Turtle, in a tone of great relief. "Now at ours they had at the end of the bill French, music, and washing. Extra." "You couldn't have wanted it much," said Alice, living at the bottom of the sea. "I couldn't afford to learn it," said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. I only took the regular course. What was that? Inquired Alice. Reeling and writhing, of course, to begin with, the Mock Turtle replied. And then the different branches of arithmetic: ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision. I never heard of uglification, Alice ventured to say. What is it? The Gryphon lifted up both his paws in surprise. Never heard of uglifying, it exclaimed. You know what it is to beautify, I suppose. Well, yes, said Alice doubtfully. It means to make anything prettier. Well, then, the Gryphon went on, if you don't know what to uglify is, you are a simpleton. Alice did not feel encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to the Mock Turtle and said, What else had you to learn? Well, there was mystery, the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the subject on his flippers. Mystery, ancient and modern, with seography, then drawling. The drawling master was an old conger eel who used to come once a week. He taught us drawling, stretching, and fainting in coils. What was that like? Said Alice. Well, I can't show you myself, the Mock Turtle said. I'm too stiff, and the Gryphon never learnt it. Hadn't time, said the Gryphon. I went to the classical master, though. He was an old crab, he was. I never went to him, the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. Yes.
Sorry, just a contractual obligation. Warning.
Absolutely.
This broadcast will be terminated in 1 hour. This is not a warning. This will actually happen. Sorry, carry on.
All righty. I think we had passed reeling and writhing, and we're on to uglification. I never went to him, the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. Oh, wait, hadn't time, said the Gryphon. I went to the classical master, though. He was an old crab, he was. I never went to him, the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say. So he did, said the Gryphon, sighing in his turn, and both creatures hid their faces in their paws. And how many hours a day did you do lessons, said Alice, in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle, 9 the next, and so on. What a curious plan, exclaimed Alice. That's the reason they're called lessons, the Gryphon remarked, because they lesson from day to day. This was quite a new idea to Alice, and she thought it over a little bit before she made a direct remark. Then the 11th day must have been a holiday. Of course it was, said the Mock Turtle. And how did you manage on the 12th? Alice went on eagerly. That's enough about lessons, the Gryphon interrupted in a very decided tone. Tell us something about the games now. Chapter 10, The Lobster Quadrille. The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and drew the back of one flipper across his eyes. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute or two sobs choked his voice. Same as he had a bone in his throat, said the Gryphon, and it set to work shaking him and punching him in the back. At last the Mock Turtle recovered his voice. With tears running down his cheeks, he went on again. You may not have lived much under the sea. I haven't, said Alice. And perhaps you were never even introduced to a lobster. Alice began to say, I once tasted, but checked herself hastily and said, No, never. So you can have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is. No, indeed, said Alice. What sort of a dance is it? Why, said the Gryphon, you first form into a line along the seashore. 2 lines, cried the Mock Turtle. Seals, turtles, salmon, and so on. And then when you've cleared all the jellyfish out of the way, that generally takes some time, interrupted the Gryphon, you advance twice, each with a lobster as a partner, cried the Gryphon. Of course, said the Mock Turtle. Advance twice, set to partner. Change lobsters and retire the same order, continued the Gryphon. Then you know, the Mock Turtle went on. You throw the lobsters, shouted the Gryphon with a bound in the air. As far out to sea as you can. Swim after them, screamed the Gryphon. Turn a somersault in the air, cried the old Mock Turtle, capering wildly about. Change lobsters again, yelled the Gryphon at the top of its voice. Back to land again, and... That's all the first figure, said the Mock Turtle, suddenly dropping his voice. And the 2 creatures who had been jumping about like mad things all this time sat down again, very sadly and quietly, and looked at Alice. It must be a very pretty dance, said Alice timidly. Would you like to see a little of it, said the Mock Turtle. Very much indeed, said Alice. Come, let's try the first figure, said the Mock Turtle to the Gryphon. We can do it without lobsters, you know. Which shall sing? Oh, you sing, said the Gryphon. I've forgotten the words. So they began slowly dancing round and round Alice, every now and then treading on her toes when they passed too close, and waving their forepaws to mark the time, while the Mock Turtle sang this very slowly and sadly. Will you walk a little faster, said the whiting to the snail. There's a porpoise right behind me, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They're waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be. They take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not join the dance. Would not join the dance. What matters is how far we go, his scaly friend replied. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn, not pale, beloved snail, come and join the dance. Will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, won't you join the dance? Thank you, it's a very interesting dance to watch, said Alice, feeling very glad that it was over at last. And I do so like that curious song about the whiting. Oh, as to the whiting, said the Mock Turtle, well, you've seen them, of course. Yes, said Alice, I've always seen them at She checked herself hastily. I don't know where Din may be, said the Mock Turtle. But if you've seen them so often, of course you know what they're like. I believe so, Alice replied thoughtfully. They have their tails in their mouths and they're all over crumbs. You're wrong about the crumbs, said the Mock Turtle. Yes.
I just want to give a round of applause to Jade for the Will You, Won't You dance song.
Oh, it was pretty awesome, yeah. Agree.
I made it up as I went along.
Very impressive.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome.
Well, thank you. As I said, I got that point that, oh crap, I got to sing it, so I just made it up. Okay. Trying to do my Mock Turtle best. Okay, shall we go on?
Yes.
And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with the illustrations, the Mock Turtle is basically, if you look at a turtle shell with a calf sticking out of it. You've got a calf head, calf feet, and turtle flippers in the front. That's what a Mock Turtle looks like in the illustration.
Yeah.
And everyone should know what a griffin looks like. All right, so let's go. They have their tails in their mouths, and they're all over crumbs. Well, you're wrong about the crumbs, said the Mock Turtle. Crumbs would all wash off in the sea, but they have their tails in their mouths. And the reason is, here the Mock Turtle yawned and shut his eyes. Tell her about the reason and all that, he said to the Griffin. The reason is, said the Griffin, that they would go with the lobsters to the dance, so they got thrown out to sea. So they had to fall a long way. So they got their tails fast in their mouths, so they couldn't get them out again, that's all. Thank you, said Alice. It's very interesting. I never knew so much about a whiting before. I can tell you more than that, if you'd like, said the Griffin. Do you know why it's called a whiting? I never thought about that, Alice. Why? It does the boots and shoes, the Griffin replied very solemnly. Alice was thoroughly puzzled. Does the boots and shoes? She replied in a wondering tone. Why, what are your shoes done with, said the Griffin. I mean, what makes them so shiny? Alice looked down at them and considered a little before she gave her answer. They're done with blacking, I believe. Boots and shoes under the sea, the Griffin went on in a deep voice, are done with whiting. Now you know. And what are they made of? Alice asked in a tone of great curiosity. Soles and eels, of course, the Griffin replied rather impatiently. Any shrimp could have told you that. If I'd been the whiting, said Alice, whose thoughts were still running on the song, I'd have said to the porpoise, keep back, please. We don't want you with us. They were obliged to have them with him, said the Mock Turtle said. No ice fish would go anywhere without a porpoise. Wouldn't it really? Said Alice in a tone of great surprise. Of course not, said the Mock Turtle. Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going on a journey, I should say, with what porpoise? Don't you mean purpose? Said Alice. I mean what I say, the Mock Turtle replied in an offended tone. And the Griffin added, come, let's hear some of your adventures. I could tell you my adventures beginning from this morning, said Alice a little timidly. But it's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then. Explain all that, said the Mock Turtle. No, the adventures first, said the Griffin in an impatient tone. Explanations save such a dreadful time. So Alice began telling them her adventures from the time when she first saw the White Rabbit. She was a little nervous just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide. But she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, you are old, Father William, to the caterpillar. And the words all coming different. And then the Mock Turtle drew a long breath and said, that's very curious. It's about as curious as it can be, said the Gryphon. It all came out different, the Mock Turtle replied thoughtfully. I should like to hear her try and repeat something now. Tell her to begin. He looked at the Gryphon as if he thought it had some authority over Alice. Stand up and repeat. 'Tis the voice of the sluggard, said the Gryphon. How the creatures order one about and make one repeat lessons, thought Alice. I might as well be back at school at once. However, she got up and began to repeat it, but her head was so full of the lobster quadrille that she hardly knew what she was saying, and the words came out very queer indeed. 'Tis the voice of the lobster, I heard him declare. You have baked me too brown on my sugar, my hair. As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound. That's different from what I used to say when I was a child, said the Gryphon. Well, I never heard it before, said the Mock Turtle, but it sounds uncommon nonsense. Alice said nothing. She had sat down with her face in her hands, wondering if anything would ever happen in a natural way again. I should like to have it explained, said the Mock Turtle. She can't explain it, said the Gryphon. Go on with the next verse. But what about his toes? The Mock Turtle persisted. How could he turn them out with his nose, you know? It's the first position in dancing, Alice said, but she was dreadfully puzzled by the whole thing and longed to change the subject. Go on with the next verse, said the Gryphon. Repeated. It begins, I passed by his garden. Alice did not dare to disobey, though she felt sure it would come out wrong, and she went on in a trembling voice. I passed by his garden and marked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing a pie. The panther cooked pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl had the dish as its share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl, and concluded the banquet by, What is the use of repeating all this stuff? The Mock Turtle interrupted. If you don't explain it, you should go on. It is by far the most confusing thing I ever heard. Yes, I think you'd better leave off, said the Gryphon, and Alice was only too glad to do so. Shall we try another figure of the lobster quadrille? The Gryphon went on. Or would you like the Mock Turtle to sing you another song? Oh, a song, please, if the Mock Turtle would be so kind, Alice replied so eagerly. Then the Gryphon said in a rather offended tone, No accounting for taste. Sing or turtle soup with you, old fellow. The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and began in a voice choked with sobs to sing. Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen, who for such dainties would not stoop. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would not give all else for two? Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Chorus again, cried the Gryphon, and the Mock. I tried to make it a little atonal there because I figured that would be the Mock Turtle. So I hope you enjoyed.
It's a very sad and sonorous song.
Yeah, so I hope it worked. Yeah.
It worked very well.
Well, thank you.
Yes, indeed it did. Very good.
I forgot I was going to have to make up music as I went along here, but
You're doing an amazing job, Jade. Most
well,
impressive.
thank you. And if anybody tries to DMCA this, tell them where they can go. That was made up on the fly.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's see you content match that.
Yeah.
I know. I want to see that one, really, seriously. Okay. Anyway, back to... Chorus again, cried the Griffin, and the Mock Turtle had just begun to repeat it when the cry of "The trial's beginning" was heard in the distance. "Come on," cried the Griffin, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off without waiting for the end of the song. "What trial is it?" Alice panted as she ran, but the Griffin only answered, "Come on," and ran the faster, while more and more faintly came on the breeze that followed them the melancholy words, "Soup, soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup." Chapter 11. Who Stole the Tarts? The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled all about them. All sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as a whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him, and near the king was the White Rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of this court was a table with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. I wish they'd get the trial done, she thought, and hand round the refreshments. But there seemed to be no chance of this, so she began looking at everything about her to pass away the time. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of nearly everything there. That's the judge, she said to herself, because of his great wig. The judge, by the way, was the king, and he wore his crown over a wig. Look at the front piece if you want to see how he did it. He did not look at all comfortable, and it was certainly not becoming. And that's the jury box, thought Alice, and those 12 creatures. She was obliged to say creatures, you see, because some of them were animals and some of them were birds. I suppose they're the jurors. She said this last word 2 or 3 times over to herself, being rather proud of it, for she thought, and rightly too, that very few little girls of her age knew the meaning of it at all. However, jurymen would have done just as well. The 12 jurors were all writing very busily on slates. "What are they doing?" Alice whispered to the Griffin. "They can't have anything to put down yet before the trial's begun." "They're putting down their names," the Griffin whispered in reply, for fear they should forget them before the end of the trial. "Stupid things!" Alice began in a loud, indignant voice, but she stopped herself hastily. For the White Rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" and the king put on his spectacles and looked anxiously around to make out who was talking. Alice could see as well as if she were looking over their shoulders that all the jurors were writing down stupid things on their slates. And she could even make out that one of them didn't know how to spell stupid, and that he had to ask his neighbor to tell him. A nice muddle their slates will be in before the trial's over, thought Alice. One of the jurors had a pencil. It squeaked. This, of course, Alice could not stand, and she went round the court and got behind him, and very soon found an opportunity of taking it away. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill the Lizard, could not make out at all what had become of it. So after hunting all about for it, he was obliged to write with one finger for the rest of the day, and this was of very little use, as it left no mark on the slate.
Poor
Harold,
Bill,
read the...
that's all. Sorry.
I
to interrupt,
know!
but poor Bill. I mean,
Bill
that
catches
poor
it.
little lizard.
Bill's not terribly bright.
He's not, is he?
No. Didn't you see him
Sucks
just
to be
half
Bill.
asleep trying to write on his slate with his finger and not working at all? Poor Bill. Now, if he'd thought better, he could have used his claw.
Yeah, sucks to be Bill.
Yeah, I know. Poor Bill. So, Harold, read the accusation, said the king. On this, the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet and then unrolled the parchment scroll and read as follows. The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole them tarts and took them all quite away. Consider your verdict, the king said to the jury. Not yet, the rabbit hastily interrupted. There's a great deal to come before that. Call the first witness, said the king. The White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet and called out, First witness! The first witness was the Hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. I beg pardon, your majesty, he began, for bringing these in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea as I was set for. You ought to have finished, said the king. When did you begin? The Hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, said the Dormouse. Write that down, the king said to the jury, and the jury eagerly wrote down all 3 dates on their slates, then added them up and reduced the answer to shillings and pence. Take off your hat, the king said to the Hatter. It isn't mine, said the Hatter. Stolen, the king exclaimed, turning to the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact. I keep them to sell, the Hatter added as an explanation. I've none of my own. I'm a hatter. Here the queen put on her spectacles and began staring hard at the Hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. Give your evidence, said the king, and don't be nervous or I'll have you executed on the spot. This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the queen, and in his confusion he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court, but on second thought she decided to remain where she was, as long as there was room for her. I wish you wouldn't squeeze so, said the Dormouse, who was sitting next to her. I can hardly breathe. I can't help it, said Alice very meekly. I'm growing. You have no right to grow here, said the Dormouse. Don't talk nonsense, said Alice more boldly. You know you're growing too. Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, said the Dormouse, not in that ridiculous fashion. And he got up very sulkily and crossed over to the other side of the court. All this time the queen had never left off staring at the Hatter, and just as the Dormouse crossed the court, she said to one of the officers of the court, Bring me the list of the singers in the last concert, on which the wretched Hatter trembled so he shook off both his shoes. Give your evidence, said the king, repeated angrily, or I'll have you executed whether you're nervous or not. I'm a poor man, your majesty, said the Hatter, began in a trembling voice, and I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so, and with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkling of the tea— The twinkling of what? Said the king. It began with the tea, the Hatter replied. Of course twinkling begins with a T, said the king sharply. Do you take me for a dunce? Go on. I'm a poor man, the Hatter went on, and most things twinkled after that, only the March Hare said, I didn't. The March Hare interrupted the great Hare. You did, said the Hatter. I deny it, said the March Hare. He denies it, said the king. Leave out that part. Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said. The Hatter went on looking anxiously around to see if he would deny it too, but the Dormouse denied nothing, being fast asleep. After that, continued the Hatter, I cut some more bread and butter. But what did the Dormouse say? One of the jury asked. That I can't remember, said the Hatter. You must remember, remarked the king, or I'll have you executed. The miserable Hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. I'm a poor man, your majesty. You're a very poor speaker, said the king. Here one of the guinea pigs cheered and was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court. As that is a rather hard word, I will try to explain to you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag, which tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this they slipped the guinea pig head first and then sat upon it. I'm glad I've seen that done, thought Alice. I've so often read in newspapers at the end of trials there was some attempt at applause, which is immediately suppressed by the officers of the court, and I never understood what it meant until now. If that's all you know about it, you may stand down, continued the king. I can't go no lower, said the Hatter. I'm on the floor as it is. Then you may sit down, said the king. Here the other guinea pig cheered and was suppressed. Come, that finishes the guinea pigs, thought Alice. Now shall we get on better? I'd rather finish my tea, said the Hatter with an anxious look at the queen, who was reading the list of singers. You may go, said the king, and the Hatter hurriedly left the court without even waiting to put his shoes on. And just take his head off outside, the queen added to one of the officers. But the Hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. Call the next witness, said the king. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was, even before she got into the court, by the way the people near the door began sneezing all at once. Give your evidence, said the king. Shan't, said the cook. The king looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness. Well, if I must, I must, said the king with a melancholy air. And after folding his arms and frowning at the cook until his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in a deep voice, What are tarts made out of? Pepper, mostly, said the cook. Treacle, said a sleepy voice behind her. Call her that dormouse, the queen shrieked. Behead that dormouse! Turn that dormouse out of the court! Suppress him! Pinch him! Off with his whiskers! For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, getting the dormouse turned out, and by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. Never mind, said the king with an air of great relief. Call the next witness. And he added in an undertone to the queen, Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quite makes my forehead ache. Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like. But they haven't got much evidence yet, she said to herself, Imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice the name Alice! Chapter 12. Alice's Evidence. Here! Cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tripped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen on the heads of the crowd below, and there they lay sprawling about, reminding her very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up as quickly as she could. The accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back into the jury box, or they would die. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king in a very grave voice, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as he said so. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that in her haste she had put the lizard in head downwards. Poor Bill. And the poor little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, being quite unable to move. She soon got it out again and put it right. Not that it signifies much, she said to herself. I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other. As soon as the jury had recovered a little from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with his mouth open, gazing into the roof of the court. "What do you know about this business?" the king said to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever?" persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. "That's very important," the king said, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on the slates when the White Rabbit interrupted. "Unimportant, your majesty, means of course," he said in a very respectful tone, but frowning and making faces at him as he spoke. "Unimportant, of course, I meant," the king hastily said, and went on to himself in an undertone. "Important, unimportant, unimportant, important," as if you're trying which word sounded best. Some of the jury wrote it down important and some unimportant. Ella could see this as she was near enough to look over their slates. But it doesn't matter a bit, she thought to herself. At this moment the king, who had been for some time busily writing in his notebook, called out, "Silence!" and read from his book. "Rule 42, all persons more than a mile high to leave the court." Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles," added the queen. "Well, I shan't go at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now. It's the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "There's more evidence to come yet, please, your majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up." "What's in it?" said the queen. "I haven't opened it yet," said the White Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king. "It was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. "It isn't directed at all," said the White Rabbit. "In fact, there's nothing written on the outside." He unfolded the paper as he spoke and added, "It isn't a letter at all, it's a set of verses." "Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?" asked another juryman. "No, they're not," said the White Rabbit, "and that's the queerest thing about it." The jury all looked puzzled. "He must have imitated somebody else's hand," said the king. The jury all brightened up again. "Please, your majesty," said the knave, "I didn't write it, and they can't prove that I did. There's no name signed at the end." "If you didn't sign it," said the king, "that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant such mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man." There was a general clapping of hands at this. It was the first really clever thing the king had said that day. "That proves his guilt, of course," said the queen, "so off with—" "Doesn't prove anything of the sort," cried Alice. "Why, you don't even know what they're about." "Read them," said the king. The White Rabbit put on his spectacles. "Where shall I begin, your majesty?" he asked. "Beginning at the beginning," said the king very gravely, "and go on until you come to the end, and then stop." There was dead silence in the court whilst the White Rabbit read out these verses. "They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should put the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. You gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts to you to set them free exactly as we were. My notion was that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him and ourselves and it. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret kept from all the rest between yourself and me." That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet, said the king, rubbing his hands. So now let the jury, if any of them could explain it, said Alice. She had grown so large in the last few minutes, she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting him. I'll give him a sixpence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. The jury wrote all down on their slates, she doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. But none of them attempted to explain the paper. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet I don't know, he went on, spreading out the verses on his knee and looking at them with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in them. After all, said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He said, added, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly. Do I look like it? He said, which he certainly did not, being entirely made of cardboard. All right so far, said the king, and he went on muttering over the verses to himself. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. If she should push the matter on, that must be the queen. What would become of you? What indeed? I gave her one, they gave him two. Why, that must be what he did with the tarts, you know. But it goes on, they all returned from him to you, said Alice. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, before she had this fit, you never had fits, my dear, I think, he said to the queen. Never, said the queen, furiously throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke. The unfortunate little Bill had left off writing on his slate with one figure. As he found it made no mark, but he now hastily began again, using the ink that was trickling down his face as long as it lasted. Then the words don't fit you, said the king, looking round the court with a smile. There was a dead silence. It's a pun, the king added in an angry tone. Everybody laughed. Let the jury consider their verdict, the king said for about the 20th time that day. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, Alice, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up in the air, came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half out of fright, half out of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank, with her head on the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice, and she told her sister as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about. And when she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, It was a curious dream, dear, certainly, but I'll run into your tea, it's getting late. So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still, just as he left her, leaning her head on her hand, watching the setting sun, and thinking of little Alice and all her wonderful adventures, till she too began dreaming after a fashion. And this was her dream. First she dreamed about little Alice herself. Once again the tiny hands were clasped upon her knee, and the bright eager eyes were looking up into hers. She could hear the very tones of her voice, and see that queer little toss of her head to keep back the watering hair that would always get into her eyes. And still as she listened or seemed to listen, the whole place around her became alive with the strange creatures of her little sister's dream. The long grass rustled at her feet, and the white rabbit hurried by. The frightened mouse splashed his way through the neighboring pool. She could hear the rattle of the teacups as the marsh hare and his friends shared the never-ending meal, and the shrill voice of the queen ordering off her unfortunate guest to execution. And once more the pig baby was sneezing on the Duchess's knee, while the plates and dishes crashed around it. Once more the shriek of the griffin, the squeaking of the lizard's slate pencil, the choking of the suppressed guinea pigs filled the air, mixed up with the distant sob of the miserable mock turtle. So she sat on with closed eyes, and half believed herself in Wonderland, though she knew she had but to open them again and all would change to dull reality. The grass would only be rustling in the wind, and the pool rippling to the waving of the reeds. The rattling teacups would change to tinkling sheep bells. The queen's shrill cries, the voice of the shepherd boy, and the sneeze of the baby, the shriek of the griffin, and all the other queer noises would change, she knew, to the confused clamor of the busy farmyard, while the lowing of the cattle in the distance would take the place of the mock turtle's heavy sobs. Lastly, she pictured to herself how this same little sister of hers would in the aftertime be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep, through all her riper years, the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather about her other little children and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago, and how she would feel with all their simple sorrows and find a pleasure in their simple joys, remembering her own child life and the happy summertime days. The end. And I hope all the grown children listening to this enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was
excellent.
Yeah, that was absolutely awesome, Jade, and so beautifully timed, even with all the interruptions.
I can't believe we made it. Yes, perfectly.
And so that actually fits into a 4-hour hangout. So there you go. Alice in Wonderland, as penned by Lewis Carroll, read by Megriagris.
Meliagris Felis. Just call me
There
Jade.
you go. What she said. So yeah, what she said. There you go. That was Alice in Wonderland.
Sorry.
Let me hang on. Let me just get back over here. Turn that off. There we go. I can see you now. Thank you to the 8 viewers who actually pegged it through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm not quite sure what's happening next. Trelawney, are you going to do an after party or something?
Yeah, maybe. Why not?
Okay.
Why not?
Alrighty.
All right.
I'll leave that in your capable hands then. And any final words from anybody before I end the broadcast and say good night?
Well, sometime in the beginning you said you had an idea. I didn't know if you remembered what that was about, or.
Yeah, it was some time ago. I had an idea of. I quite like the idea of perhaps reading the first chapter of a variety of books in video, just to give people a taster. And I mean, not even necessarily books I like. Just some random books almost. Just to like to read the first chapter, but I never got around to it because I don't really make videos. And I was wondering if it could be a sort of collab idea.
Well, you know what?
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
You know what? This is the perfect venue for an online book club. We could read the first chapter of something.
Yeah, I think so too. We've seen that it works here, and we actually had people listening to us. So, mean, and let's not forget, this was just through the Looking Glass. I mean, this was just the first part. There's another part.
Alice with the Looking Glass.
Through the Looking Glass.
So tune in next week, possibly, for Through the Looking Glass, perhaps.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't do Through the Looking Glass next week, and maybe we could keep this up every week or so, and read different books that are online. I know, for one, one of my favorite books, The Wind in the Willows.
Oh, yeah.
That's a classic.
A.A. Milne.
Yeah. No, it's not A.A. Milne.
And if people
no, it's not, is it?
Yeah.
No.
It's
no, it's not. It's
no. I do know who wrote it, but I can't remember.
I know too, but the minute it's one of those things. Remember we were talking about this, Dee? The minute
nitroglycerin.
Yeah, the minute somebody says something like that,
Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah,
everybody's minds blanks out at the same time.
E.H. Shepard drew the pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, drat! That's something I know so well. But yeah, we were talking about that last night. How the minute somebody else blanks out, everybody else does.
Come on, we have to get the author of Wind in the Willows before the end of this hangout.
Kenneth Graham.
Kenneth Graham, yes.
And in all honesty, I had to look it up because my mind was blanking. Kenneth Graham. I adore that book. I adore that book.
Yeah. So
that would be a fun. Yeah.
Yeah. If this goes down well, then sorry, I don't know if you can hear it. Hopefully not for copyright reasons. But I've got PA currently playing Portal 2 theme song. So, no, it's not going through. Thank goodness for isolated mics. Yeah, maybe if it goes down well, and it may, I don't know, given that this is the first time I've actually picked up G+ points during a hangout. Yeah, maybe Read Along with Jade could become a regular feature.
Yes,
maybe.
And I wonder how much singing there is in Through the Looking Glass.
I'm trying to think. God.
That was funny.
Well, I look forward to it. And yeah,
I'm going to have
note,
to listen back to it because I was just like, I was winging it and trying not to make it too regular because it's Alice in Wonderland. I come to another line.
Very well written. Sorry.
You don't want to. I didn't want to sing this line the same as I sung like the previous stanza because it's Alice in Wonderland. I didn't want it to be regular or too regular. So.
Sorry.
Well,
yeah, well.
on behalf of everybody that listened live and everybody that listens on the replay, thank you very much, Jade. That was absolutely
welcome.
Yes,
awesome.
thank you indeed.
I'm glad you liked it. I wasn't sure if anybody would or not. As I said, it was just when I started the hangout last night, I thought, well, what if nobody shows up? And I thought, I'll just read Alice in Wonderland. So that's kind of where it came from. And then I mentioned it to Dee. Remember, I mentioned it at the end of last night, Dee, and you said, kind of like, I wish we hadn't, done it.
So then we came.
So I said, well, okay, I'll do it today, and we tried to schedule it so that it would fit in with real time and my time as best we could. So.
Maybe something else that we could look into doing is maybe sort of live reading of various plays that there are.
Oh, I love plays.
I'm thinking that we could go Terry Pratchett perhaps, because some of the Discworld books have actually been transposed into screenplays.
Yeah, as long
not
as
so much screenplays, but theatre plays. Plays. Yeah, as long
should
as
do Oscar Wilde's
trouble
for being.
I love the importance of being earnest.
Just so somebody can go, a handbag.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That is just.
Yeah, and if they could, if they could come off in a Brian Blessed, that would be awesome.
Yes. Well, and another thing too, there are some books that if you read them if you try to read them like when I studied English literature, and I mean English literature, not literature in English, English literature. I always try to make that clear because my understanding of American literature is actually a lot more vague. But when you read things like Lawrence or Forster, and those are or something like two classics that I hated as a kid and loved as an adult. A Pope's The Rape of the Lock and Spencer's The Fairy Queen. Now there's a couple of things to read. Is the language, because it's from a different time period, the language is kind of awkward or difficult for people to get used to. And I discovered that if just reading aloud to myself helped.
Yeah, I know what you mean, actually. I sometimes have to read out loud.
Yeah, because I mean the first time I tried to read, what was I trying to read? I tried to read I was trying to read The Rainbow. You remember Florence?
Did we have a mosquito just then, or is IG's modem?
Oh, I wonder if it was me because I was a bit away from the computer. Sorry.
I
was looking at some of the books on my bookshelf. Right. The ones behind me aren't actually fiction. Yeah, well, some of them I'm sure are.
But it's a good way to introduce, because we have people today with such a short attention span.
Yeah.
I know Mimico is joking about books, but there's a certain amount of truth to that. And if you can.
Well, I mean, we're not actually limited, thinking about it, to the classics. because
No, no, we're not.
there are a number of other really good books. I think the author's name was Barry. I'm not sure, but there's some excellent stories such as The Faraway Tree, and they make for some really excellent reading. And yeah, it's the sort of thing like Alice in Wonderland that IG Christian and very other people would quite happily stick in front of their kids.
Well, like I say, the initial.
There's some really there is a wealth of good literature out there, and I think a lot of it's getting missed.
I say, some time ago, I thought about just reading, like I said, just the first chapter of a book, just to sort of tempt people to see, oh, look, does this sound interesting? So, I think at first I was going to read, I don't know if you're familiar with an author called Jules Watson, but then I realised that all the names were like Gaelic names, and there's no way I was going to be able to pronounce them.
Oh, I know. There are some books that I adore, but I can't pronounce the names properly.
Yeah.
I just sort of make them up in my head. Yeah.
Jules Watson. She's actually a genuine historian, but she writes fiction books, sort of based around sort of these. I don't know. It's difficult to explain what sort of books they are, really, but they're all sort of Gaelic.
Yeah,
they're not fact books, but they're based on actual. Her knowledge is based from fact stuff that she studied properly, even though they are definitely fiction books. They're quite raunchy as well in some places. Quite you've got love, violence, sex, you name it. They're good books. I highly recommend them. As I say, all the names are Gaelic names. It's like, even though in most of the books at the beginning she has how you pronounce them, it'd be like, I still not.
I can't find it at the moment.
But yeah, I think definitely we need to.
Somewhere I've got. Where is it? I can't find it, but it's a very similar thing. With regards to the historical accuracy, yes, there's a lot of work that's been put into it, but I've got a novel that is based on the sailing of the Beagle.
Oh, that's marvelous. I love that. Yes. Yeah, I have that too.
Yeah, and I can't find it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think we need to start the I don't know. We'll have to get a proper name for it, but our book club. It's a hangout book club. And we have to we have to get a good name for it though. And we could announce what we're going to read, and it would be nice to some of the
title.
stuff.
I've got the title, Hanging with Literature or Hanging with Books.
Yeah.
Not Listen with Mother then.
No, not Listen with Mother.
That's good. No, sometime earlier in the.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we shall begin.
Yeah. Then we can. Well, I think I like. I don't know. I don't know which I like best, because on the one hand, literature, like you're expanding to plays and things
but
like that.
Hanging with Books is
Books sounds
more
a little
hip,
better,
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit more hip.
Oh, we got to get a good graphic for it. My mind immediately goes to like some monkey hanging on a bookshelf or something. But I mean, that's a little simplistic. But we've got to get a good graphic for that,
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of those little wooden hanging monkeys that used to hang like that.
Look at me! Yeah.
I have a monkey to hang on my book.
You have them. Awesome.
Yes. That's great. Yeah. But we could get the graphic that would include things like, there we go. We could put up like a turkey for me and Brian's cock. I mean, the bird one.
Rooster.
The rooster. Brian, and because everybody has their. I mean, Char's got her squirrel. And,
Yeah, Char's squirrel. Yeah, there you go. Animals. Yeah. There you go. Animals hanging with books.
And I have a green monkey.
Yeah. There we go. Look, I love that monkey. Yes.
It's actually my partner's monkey. He said he said once, "I wish I had a monkey." So I ordered him a monkey.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think that's another word. It takes.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's been up several mountains as well. This monkey. He's taking it rock climbing.
Well, you know what? If I had a monkey, and I was going up mountains and things, I would feel so bad if I didn't take the monkey with me.
Yeah, really.
Seriously, I mean, why shouldn't if I have actually, taken it upon myself to have a friendship, a relationship with a monkey, then, it's like having a dog or,
Right.
something else. Whither I go, goest thou.
Yeah. And what I was just thinking this our animals with books, animals hanging with books, is we could have a graphic where you have the books piled up, and they're not like there might be a bookshelf there, but you have the books piled up so that you've got like a little squirrel in a tree made of books. The books are all piled up, little squirrels on top, a little hutch that something else is in, and things like that. A landscape made of books, sort of, not literally a landscape, piles of books that you've got a little hidey hole where somebody is peeking out here, and
okay.
I wish on the bureau reading the
yeah.
I have 4 words for you, Jade.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
I could have my monkey reading a book.
Yeah.
Actually,
at which point hasn't Trollolin got his after party started yet?
I don't know. I don't see it.
Because he dropped, didn't he?
Yeah, he was gonna.
Yeah. That's a better size
Okay.
book for my monkey to read.
Of course, he couldn't take a
well,
break before he gets to.
I suppose we should deal the mercy blow to the 8 viewers that we have left and say, okay,
Oh
we
God,
will see you in the after party.
I didn't realise we were still on air. For some reason, I thought.
Yeah, we are actually still on air, believe it or not.
It goes back into hiding. My monkey's fallen over.
Yeah, sorry, I entirely forgot to hit the end broadcast, so I will do that now. We will catch you later on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the reading, whether it was live or on the playback, and we hope to see you next time.